So good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We have a truly global audience for these programs over the last day and a half. My name is Jesse Hildebrand. I am one of your final hosts as we wrap up the My Nature Love Story epic conclusion with our final block of programs in what has been 48 hours of incredible sessions from 6 continents, over 25 countries around the globe, featuring some of the coolest conservationists, educators, and storytellers around the globe. Now, if you are unfamiliar with the Nature for All Global Network, it is this collaboration of all these incredible groups working to save the planet and to educate the public around them around planet Earth. We have the chance through our work to partner them together to help showcase the amazing work that these organizations do. And we wanted to do a big blitz of events. And that was the foundation or the origin story for the Nature for All Love Fest. If you haven't checked out this website, there's been so much on the go over the last 2 weeks. Everything from art campaigns to storytelling events live on stage in Vancouver there's more than I could possibly count. Go check out the website and find out some more. But this event has been our capstone, the biggest thing ever in the history of Nature for All, and that has been this huge series of broadcasts featuring nature love stories. We want to hear from some of the best people on the planet, what got them into their fields, why they're so inspired, why they're optimistic about the future, and more detail on what they do, all the different approaches to saving planet Earth and more. So with that in mind, leading into our final 5 broadcasts, I'm going to welcome in Marina Best. She's going to join us and tell us a little bit about the amazing stuff she gets up to. Marina, welcome in. We were saying before we got underway that you look very angelic with this backdrop, and I want to lead in with that because it's a beautiful kickoff to our final block together.
Thanks, Jesse, and nice to see you. And yeah, I did choose one that's very angelic. So
it is. I'll go get my halo from the other room if we want to have a joint interview. But you know what? We'll keep it together. We'll hold it together for now. And I just want to learn more about the work that you do. You're with Parks Canada, which I must say, as a Canadian, having been to Parks Canada sites, having moved to Newfoundland where I am now, because of my experience at a Parks Canada site, it's a pretty special organization and one very heavily involved, of course, in the Nature for All Network. So tell us a little bit about your work there.
Sure. So I started working with Parks Canada just over 7 years ago, where I started my career in the agency on a project to reconnect local Indigenous peoples with the lands and waters of the park in Prince Albert National Park, and also connecting the aspects of bison conservation and grassland restoration. So that was the first project that I worked on. It had a connection aspect right at the core of it. And basically ever since then, that helped to catalyze the direction of my career. So I saw an opportunity to enhance that connectivity aspect of these places that so typically have kind of held people or distanced people away from them. And I just kind of took that and ran with it.
Well, I was going to say, from someone who's been in the conservation education field for about exactly 7 years now, since I finished university and got into this space, you could not have come in with that as an origin story at a better time if you possibly tried. Because when I was a kid, when you were a kid, Indigenous stories, if they were talked about in a conservation context, were minimized. They were like, oh, this used to happen. Maybe they're happening somewhere else. Oh, New Zealand's got some cool stuff going on, perhaps. But I simply never heard about it in Canada. It was not something that was talked about. Maybe it was involved in government agencies. I don't know, but I never saw any evidence of it. And over the last 7 years, there's been this huge, tremendous shift to bring in Indigenous communities into this conversation, to draw upon thousands of years of knowledge and understanding of landscapes and ecosystems to inform how we do policy when it comes to conservation. And frankly, I'm in education. I get to work with a lot of teachers. The yearning for teachers and for students to learn about these stories is so profound. When we do broadcasts with Indigenous speakers, they get more than triple the average audience of everything we do. If we can bring in an astronaut, we can bring in someone from an Indigenous community in Alberta to talk about the work they do there, you'll have 3 times the audience over the astronaut for that. And that's amazing. Like, that is something that never would have happened when I was a kid. And it's a testament to the work of people like you. And so I'm curious, so from this original project, what do you get to do now that sort of builds off that origin?
So right now I am working in a very new space, and it's a new space within Parks Canada as it exists. I'm the manager of Indigenous relations for the National Urban Parks and Ecological Corridors programs. So those are 2 very new programs within the agency. And yeah, basically kind of helping build them from the ground up together with a number of different partners from very diverse backgrounds, and yeah, hopefully making them into something that is going to be very, very meaningful for a lot of different people.
I certainly think so. I mean, the problem with this interview is that I have so many follow-up questions in this that would take us well beyond our 30 minutes, but you and I can talk a little bit later. But do tell us a little more about ecological corridors and the urban park system. I'd love to highlight both of those, and we'll sort of dive in from there.
Yeah, so again, as I mentioned previously, they're very new programs, so they were just announced within, just over the last year or so, and they're looking at doing things a little bit differently. So, of course, as you know, you mentioned you've been able to have the pleasure of visiting some of Parks Canada administered places, and a lot of those tend to be quite distant from a lot of people. So, the Urban Parks program is looking to really build something that will enable a lot of people from, again, very diverse backgrounds who may have not had the opportunity to visit some of these places to have that right in their own backyard. So again, looking at aspects like accessibility, opportunities that, are on the side of usage, and then just other things that, a range of partners and interested individuals that come from these urban backgrounds might be, interested in exploring further with us. So the program itself is just starting to build up. We have a number of candidate sites across the country. So there's one closer to you in the Halifax area, but they're kind of dotted across the country. And they're just more or less pilot projects that are helping us kind of build the plane while flying it at the same time we're looking at the program. So I think it's a really interesting way of doing things because instead of us kind of creating or baking this policy for the Urban Parks program, we get to actually see the things that folks on the ground are interested in, hear these things directly from a lot of people across the country. And so it's really helping to blend itself into how the program develops. And it's, again, a really just interesting way of doing things. The Ecological Corridor program, on the other hand, is a little bit newer than the Urban Parks program, so it's just getting started. And that's to create a network of these ecological corridors across the country. We're not necessarily establishing these places in the same sense as you might think of like a national urban park or national park or other protected areas that Parks Canada administers, but it's creating those networks of spaces and exploring what that looks like. So again, it's a little bit newer than the Urban Parks program, but it's kind of the same sentiment that a lot of partnership and collaboration and things like that to help set it in the right direction.
Well, one of the things that we've been featuring in a lot of the broadcasts today is this idea of 30 by 30, which is a thing that's been adopted by a lot of governments. NGOs talk about it all the time. We're protecting 30% of the land surface by 2030. And to do that, we're going to need to adopt new approaches in terms of how we conserve things, how we fund things, create things, because the model as it's existed so far is not going to be able to account for the amount of growth that we need in that area in the next 7 years. And so I have all the links, Marina. I got all the toys here. In terms of ecological corridors, I really encourage our audience to check out Yellowstone to Yukon. This is sort of the fantastic North American ecological corridor. We've had the chance to work with Aaron Jacob, who was there for many years in some of our broadcasts. You guys just announced fairly recently an amazing partnership with the Royal Botanical Garden, which is an incredible organization for their ecological corridor right in the Golden Horseshoe area near Toronto. So I'd encourage our audience to check that out as well. And from the urban park perspective, I grew up in Toronto. And I was lucky enough to be a kid that my parents took me to all the fancy places. We went to Sandbanks, we went to Algonquin, which are provincial parks in Ontario, and such special places. But a lot of people don't have that access. They might never get that opportunity, whether they don't have the means to get there, they don't have the financial means to get there. And Rouge Urban National Park is the example that I remember being sort of this first, big, wow, we're going to do this in an urban setting and get people involved and engaged with the natural wildlife that's close to them. It's such an exciting place to be in. So as you're doing this, you talked about bringing in Indigenous perspectives and the work that you do specifically. So what does that actually look like? This is a term and an idea that's talked about a lot, but on the ground, nitty gritty, what are you doing on the day by day to sort of incorporate this into the work?
Yeah, and I think that's a really great question, and I would say it's not something that's going to be incorporated into it, because that kind of I guess would mean that there's an existing structure that this is fitting into. But I'd like to correct people when they use that, which a lot of people do, but really try and blend these concepts together so that whatever we create at the end of the day is something that really helps elevate all of these different perspectives and ways of knowing into this place that is established under the National Urban Parks Program, or designated, I should say. And what we're doing on my team on a day-to-day basis is, we're supporting those candidate side initiatives that I mentioned before, but we're also looking broader than that. So we've connected with a number of different organizations, so Indigenous national organizations and other organizations and governments that, we think should have a voice in this. So when I say that, I mean there's a national youth organization that we're connecting with. We've also looked into like Two-Spirit organizations, again, to help bring in those diverse voices that typically, you wouldn't see in this type of, early foundational establishment, and really help learn from them, especially because, for folks from those kind of backgrounds, those urban spaces have a lot of opportunities that we can't know about until we talk to those people.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're really trying to achieve on my team, is creating those connections, seeing where there might be overlap or new ideas and concepts, and see how that could be intertwined within the development of this program.
What a fun gig to have, because you get to sort of play with these big ideas and incorporate anyone you want to feature as part of this process when you're developing these spaces. And that's an exciting place to be in any career, but very cool in the parks setting. I'm curious. I'm really curious about your background and how you got interested in this to begin with in just a second. But is there a model example of this? One of the joys of the Love Fest event is that we've had the chance to feature all these amazing people from around the globe. And I guess only example that I can think of in the world where Indigenous communities have become sort of the stewards and sort of like taken over park management is in Australia, where you have a place like Uluru, the Northern Territory, where management used to be, again, entirely settler, colonial people running the parks, and now it's been transferred over, and we're starting to see the benefits of that in a variety of ways. Is Australia a model that you guys look to? Are there other countries or other regions, or are you starting from scratch with this?
Well, yeah, that's another interesting question, because I feel like we have a lot of models within Canada itself. Like, thinking about all of these Indigenous protected and conserved areas that have emerged in the past few years, we're really seeing that Indigenous stewardship build from within these communities themselves. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from those. And we do have connections with a variety of different communities associated with those, what are called IPCAs. But then we also have other models within Parks Canada itself where we do see cooperative or co-management existing. So we see some great work being done on in Haida Gwaii, up in the northern parts of Canada. We do see that cooperative management, but across the board at Parks Canada, like a large number of our places do have that relationship building advisory body or cooperative management that we're taking into consideration when building these new places. And that's something, again, no model is going to be one that we're going to be just fitting ourselves into. We really want to create that mold and go from there.
That's actually been something that we've talked about in a lot of our community conservation events during this series, whether Benin was an example in West Africa that we talked about earlier today, is that the whole idea of, hey, we have an approach, we're coming in, here it is, take it or leave it, has been replaced by, hi, we think that this is a really valuable area. How can we work together? What can we do? What are your needs? What are your wants with regards to this? And sort of let local people lead that process, because if you come in and impose something, no matter how well-meaning, no matter how backed by science or understanding or whatever, it's ultimately something that's it's brought in. I always like to flip the example. If people from Ghana came to Canada and said, our approach is the absolute best, we do it better than anyone, and here we are, and here's all the proof, you should do it this way, and then why aren't you doing it that way? Canadians would be like, whoa, wait a second here. And I mean, it's a silly hypothetical example, but it's something that sort of reframes how people view that, I guess, to begin. I wanted to put this up on the screen too, and I'll put this in the YouTube chat in terms of the IPCAs that Marina was talking about. Just fantastic website too, by the way, so I'll make sure everyone has that as a link in just a second. Marina, how did you get so fascinated with this to be dedicating your life to it, and to have started 7 years ago, and like just you're just head honcho at this point and you get to do everything you want? But how did that come to pass, and what was the origin story?
Sure. So I am Michif, or Métis, from the Red River. So there were always a lot of just cultural ties within my own family that tied me to this type of concept of, being out on the lands and waters and wanting to see them preserved, or the health of them, being a focus of whatever place I am in. And so when I had this opportunity to start my career with Parks Canada up in Prince Albert National Park, I had a lot of familial connections to those lands. And so for me to be able to start my career in a place that, you know, I held so dearly and my family holds so dearly, I think that that was a really great way to start. And on that project that I mentioned before, where I started my career, I just saw a lot more opportunities to continue to advance my career in that area. And so basically ever since then, I've been helping to really, I guess, explore the opportunities that exist that aid in those connections or reconnections with Indigenous peoples with the work that Parks Canada is doing. So, I mean, I've done that in a variety of different ways, and this new space of urban parks and ecological corridors is only the next phase in that. But, you know, it's a learning process, and I'm by no means the head honcho or lead on this. I work with a number of really fantastic people that, you know, also have these inspiring stories and connections, and we all work together as a team to kind of advance this work as a whole. But we're by no means perfect, and we really rely on the expertise of the partners on the ground, because really those Indigenous peoples are the ones that are the experts of those lands, and we only help try and make those connections with the Parks Canada related programs that we're running.
Fantastic. Well, again, you get to work in a place that has personal meaning to you, but I'm really curious, are there places in your day-by-day life that you get to go that have a sort of special that you can share with us? It can be a local park. It can be something as big as a national park. I'm really curious what your favorite nature spot is in our love story event here.
Oh, that's a really great question. So I'm actually located out on traditional Sinixic territory in Nanaimo, British Columbia. And so I've been able to work and live across the prairies in Canada, but now I'm back on the West Coast.
Yeah.
And it's very beautiful over here. But just being on some of the Gulf Islands, I think is really nurturing for my soul, even though it's not necessarily my traditional territory. But I've just felt a sense of peace when I can be out on the lands and waters here and just, you know, even just be by myself. So it's hard to choose one, but I was just on Quadra Island, which is up north of where I live. And yeah, just being out there, I thought really just reset my whole energy.
I'll share a quick picture for our audience that might not be in Canada or know about the Gulf Islands. I mean, it's been really heartening to see as a Canadian that this has become not just a tourism destination and a place that people want to visit from across Canada, but globally, this area has been recognized as one of the most just spectacular locations on this. I mean, talk about refreshing and recharging. It'd be hard to look at that out your window and not be gobsmacked by it every single day.
Exactly. And for anyone on the line who's not from Canada, so basically where I used to work and where my familial ties are in my nation and those different connections that I have, I think it's about -30 there degrees Celsius. So being in a place that Jesse just showed us where it's like, you know, +10, it really makes it a lot easier at this time of year. But although many people very much enjoy being in the cold outdoors, but I'm just not one of them.
That's okay. They're not here to argue with you, so it's totally fine. I did the opposite. I moved from a place that was much warmer and less snowy, and now I'm in Newfoundland where there's a 7-foot drift outside my front door.
Oh, wow.
And it's wonderful, and I absolutely adore it, but not necessarily for everybody. Marina, geez, there's so many places I could take this interview over the next 10 minutes as we have together. Is there a dream of yours for the future of Canada, whether it's by 2030 or through the work that you do? Is there like a end game in mind that you would like most want to see come to fruition? If you could control all the strings yourself, what would happen?
Well, I think from my perspective, I've seen a lot of incredible work happening. Like as we mentioned before at the beginning of this interview, even just over the past 7 years or so, there's been a lot of progress when it comes to respecting and understanding Indigenous ways of knowing and Indigenous knowledge, and really the value of doing things in collaboration. And so for me, when we're thinking about these types of initiatives that I work on in my career, or anything beyond that, I would really just love to see the continuation of that collaboration take place, because I think that there's so much that can be learned and built on both sides, that I just think that that's an area that I think we need to pursue as a path. And I don't think that there's necessarily an end game, because, you know, I'm only one person, can only think of so much, but I definitely see that as a path forward for sure.
One of the things that we've had with teachers in the programs that we do, a question that we've gotten a lot is like, how do you get started? If you're a classroom, if you're an individual and you want to learn more about Indigenous communities in Canada, history, how they've been on the land, where they are across the country, is there a resource or place that you'd recommend? Is it something on Parks Canada's side? Because we hear this every time we do a program. People want to keep the learning going beyond a 45-minute talk, and they just don't know where to start in a way that would be accurate and meaningful and actually lead them where they want to go.
Yeah, that's I think a really interesting thing to hear, that people want to do that, and I think that that's fantastic. I would say that yes, you can do a lot of research online and do some Googling, but nothing beats actually going and physically being on these lands with those folks from those different communities and nations. And depending on where you're located, if you are in Canada or in a place where there are Indigenous communities, check and see if they have events, because there's nothing cooler than going to a powwow and actually seeing and being a part of those different places. And just thinking about where I used to live in Winnipeg, there would be a powwow right in the center of the city and everybody would be welcome to join. And so I think just checking out what you have in your local community is a great option. But then also just looking at what's around you. What kind of events are there? I know here out on the West Coast, there are some canoe events that are incredible and really cool to learn about. And for me, of course, with my culture being so different, it's so interesting to just continue learning about all of these different communities that have such rich histories and cultures. But yeah, it takes the time to actually go out there and make connections. And of course, for some people, meeting new people from different backgrounds can be difficult, but it's so rewarding.
I am so jealous of the canoe events. I can barely tell you. That would be the greatest. Those islands in a boat built by someone. I did go this year to my first powwow ever. Halibut Nation here, Mi'kmaq in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, was a really, really special event held at the university. It's a community that's really linked in with the Indigenous community here. They're sort of headquarters of the organization that sort of promotes and does these events is right in the town center. And so getting to see this all the time in any big public event is really changed, because in Toronto, I never saw that. Like, that was just not something that happened. If it did, it wasn't where I was. I never heard about it in anything. And to see, whether on the national park scale or local parks, more Indigenous-led events generally. If you're going to go on a hike, there's an Indigenous-led hike to teach you about that. Grossmore National Park near me in Corner Brook has these now, where it's like you go through the land and you look at the plants as potential medicines and as foods and as things that a normal guided hike would never talk about. And that's just such it's so profound. It's so meaningful. We were talking with David Borish yesterday, who did this incredible film about the Labrador communities, the Inuit communities, and the caribou there, and getting to go out in the land with them, and people who could be like, yes, there's a caribou herd 50 kilometers that way from tracks in the snow. And that level of knowledge that you can only get from being so connected with the land for thousands of years is astonishing. It's so much different than anything we've had the chance to experience, or a lot of Canadians have ever had the chance to experience, and it's so heartening to see it come to fruition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Marina, is there, geez, we've only got time flies and you're having fun in these programs. We've got 5 minutes together. It feels like too much pressure. Is there a particularly meaningful experience that you've had in nature that you'd like to share, sort of a nature love story personally, for over the next little bit? I'd love to hear from you. If there's anything that jumps to mind.
Yeah, that's a really that's tough. For me, my best memories have been the ones where I've been out on the lands and waters with my family. So my family is like, big fishing family, hunting, camping, all of those things. And I think some of my core memories that I have are just doing those things with my family. So we tend to have a big fishing trip every single year. In the past, we would also do a lot of camping and whatnot, and just have fun outside. And I feel like that really just helps, connect yourself with the others around you. It doesn't have to be family, it can be friends. And also just learning new things, because, I've been fishing my entire life. And every time I go fishing with my dad, I learn something new. And even with hunting too, that's the same kind of thing. So I think those types of experiences have really just enriched myself as a person, and of course the skills related to them, but just getting to know other people, the lands and waters around me, and then being able to share those with others as well. Because for the majority of my life, I've been on the receiving end of learning all of that type of knowledge and whatnot. But, now that I have friends that are interested in doing that too, bringing them along and kind of joining in and being somebody to share those things when, you think you're the person that has nothing to share, I think is really cool to see that kind of flip around.
The relationship development, the skill development, turning learners into teachers is something that I got the chance to talk about with Matthew Zylstra earlier today. He was in South Africa, and we had this broadcast yesterday with Jess Tyrell. She runs Wild Nights Out in South Africa, taking a bunch of kids out into the land for the first time, a diverse community together. Growing up in Toronto, I had people in 50 countries, on my street, so that was very natural to me. But in a lot of places, it's not. It's a homogeneous environment. You don't interact with people that don't look like you or come from the same background. And so the outdoors as a space to foster that sort of connection is so profound. And then they brought on one of the students who'd done that, Tanashi, who's the most articulate person in the entire festival so far, Korea, by the way. Tanashi came on, he's like, look, I went out and I gained all this and I gained all this confidence and all these skills. And now I'm like training to become a teacher to like bring other students out. And I'm just sitting there with my jaw on the floor the entire broadcast long. And you're right. It's those are the most meaningful experiences in your life. And they do allow you to have that conversation and those connections that you otherwise wouldn't. I was telling someone earlier today, being a man born in the 90s, boys and men don't connect deeply with each other. There's like a distance there. There has to be. It's important because you're a man. And so I used to hang out with my friend. We play video games. We'd watch TV. We'd do all this stuff. And I started going for walks around the block. He's like, can I come? And we started walking around the block. And then we started going to parks nearby. And it's peaceful. We could talk about different things. And it's just so profound when you have that experience. It changes you. It's nice.
Yeah, totally. I completely agree with you. And I think tying it back to that national urban park aspect, there's so many people that don't have that opportunity to do things like that. Or, it's just not something that naturally occurs to them that they can do with the green spaces that may exist in their urban areas. So I think, again, just trying to highlight the importance of what comes with being in nature, I think is just something that really connects all people. Like there's just something to it, and I can't put my finger on it, what those spaces provide, but it's so different from being, in a classroom or in a workspace. It just has a completely different vibe to it and creates other types of connections that you just couldn't even really think of.
One of the things that, or a phrasing that's come up a few times is like a sense of shared awe or reverence for a space. So we've been hearing that a lot from some of our speakers, and it's been exciting to see how people connect in that way. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit with a bit of a tricky question, but I really want to ask this because I think it's really important for our audience to hear. It's so interesting as someone who gets to hang out with a lot of conservationists. Generally, when hunting is talked about, it's in a negative connotation. It's, we're hunting, we're depleting the landscape, we're killing these animals. In some cases, it's poaching, it's illegal. And every time we feature Indigenous speakers, they talk about the importance of fishing and hunting universally. I've never had a program that isn't the case. So how, as someone who was a boy and grew up thinking hunting and fishing, why would anyone ever want to do that ever? It's the worst. And my mindset completely has shifted at this point. But I'm curious, from your perspective, to someone who went in with a closed mind, how would you explain to them why it's so important and why it's actually a positive thing for the environment?
Yeah, well, I think like an easy response there would definitely be looking at hyperabundant species. And, that's a big issue with conservation of these different ecological spaces. And so hunting is a really good way or means of dealing with that. And so in my experience, like I tend to think of it from that perspective. And I think all of the Indigenous communities that I've ever interacted with, it's mainly a conservation basis that they're thinking of, because they see the different species on the ground. They can tell what the numbers are, and for most communities, they don't want those numbers to dip too low. They don't want them to get too high. But there's different ways of dealing with both of those different aspects. So, for us, we take that into consideration when we're doing these things. We're not going to overhunt. I know there's people that do from all backgrounds though, that just do things like that. And that's not something that is, intrinsically tied to one type of person or another. But ultimately looking at those Indigenous knowledge systems and how species and those numbers are intrinsically tied to, how much food do we have in the fridge? How healthy is this species? Do we need to change what we do? And I know that there's a lot of great examples where communities have changed their ways of, targeting certain species for food based on the numbers.
Yeah. It's the food aspect's interesting because as someone who grew up with like the food comes from the grocery store, moving to Newfoundland, it's been really interesting because everything's way more expensive. It's on an island, and moose hunting is a big part of the culture here. And people are like, you hunt one moose, and it's food for several families for like an entire winter. One animal.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that is such, and instead of literally hundreds and hundreds of dollars of meat, which in some cases isn't a tenable prospect. And you talk about this generational mindset where it's like, the people that are most vested in having animals to hunt generations down the line are like, I mean, are hunters themselves. They don't want to deplete the stock to nothing because then they starve, their family starves, and this is something where as, a European person of European background, come in, let's kill everything. Let's go to the next spot, kill everything there and continue on. If you are going to settle in a place for a long, long period of time, you can't have that mindset. And that's something that we come back to from Canadians, we've come back to from Africans, Australians over the course of this broadcast series. So thank you for that answer, Marina. I really appreciate that. Time flies when you're having fun. We're at the 30-minute mark. I could interview all day long, but I do have your email now, so I will be in touch. But there's some fun stuff we can do together as organizational partnerships here. Is there a final message you want to leave us with about your ever-growing field and your job right now to cap us off as a bit of a love story wrap-up before we bring in our next speaker?
I would just say, like, the work that I'm doing is, just of one person, but I think as we talked about a little bit on this conversation, like, it's really on that right path of working together in collaboration, and whether that means with Indigenous communities or, folks like yourself, Jesse, and then other folks probably on the line. I think we can learn so much from each other. And I think that this mutual understanding and appreciation for nature just helps connect us all along this path. And I think, it's a continuous process of learning that we all have to be a part of. But I think hopefully the programs that we're working on here at Parks Canada, whether it's the National Urban Parks or Ecological Corridors or beyond, that we can do that with a range of partners and continue to do that just in collaboration.
How spectacular an answer is that? The nature of collaboration has been a big focus, of course, through the entire Love Fest of events. So thank you so much for sharing your insight, your story with us today. I appreciate it more than you know. And thanks for being a part of the Love Fest. This has been marvelous.
Thank you so much, Jesse. It was my pleasure.
Thanks, Marina. Have a wonderful rest of your and
Sorry,
Jose,
jumping in.
you said there's a special surprise for me. I'm so excited.
I do. So we had a speaker who just isn't able to join us at 3:00. So I took this opportunity to surprise completely some of the people I work with, and they've been instrumental in getting the Love Fest underway. Without their work in the background, like, this would have never been. It wouldn't have never happened. Like, they have been the background that you see behind me, the background that you see on the sheet. Like, they did it. They did some pre-recorded interviews. They did the website. We managed to get like 90 some stories over the course of the year. They helped develop the whole thing. So I'd like to bring them on board and give them a little bit of an opportunity to share their stories. So they weren't prepared for this at all. Like, I completely, like, last minute, I'm like, hey, why don't we do this? And so I'm going to bring them in, and I'd love it if you can take the opportunity and the time to talk to both of them. So we have Isabelle Kim Lim and Aleksa Nitsis, and I think they deserve a lot of the credit for putting this up. I feel like we're the face of this event, but I think they're the ones that really made this happen. So I'm going to step away and let you guys have a short conversation before our next interviewer.
Well, farewell, Jose, and hello, ladies. Thank you so much for all of this. I get half the glory in all this, and it's because of all your hard work. I just get to show up and be very enthusiastic or very tired at 3 a.m, like earlier today. And just appreciate it so much, all the effort that went into this. The recorded interviews have been spectacular. The backdrops are beautiful. And so thanks for making such a spectacular event come to fruition. Isabel, your mic isn't on. See, there has to be some flaw in a tech broadcast. Otherwise, it's no fun. Your mic is on. So
is my mic on? Okay, there we go.
On. We're 1 for 2.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks. Yes, this is unexpected, but it's a nice opportunity for me and Isabel to also share our nature love story. After having listened to so many incredible, inspiring stories in the past 48 hours, and since the beginning of the Love Fest in general, it's overwhelming.
It is. It's, as I've been saying to kick off every block, it's like 25 plus programs, 6 continents, just these incredible tales. And so I'm curious, while Isabel works out her mic, and I'll talk to you in the chat to try and help you sort out that in a second. Aleksa, how did you get interested in this? Like, what is your backdrop to lead you to want to be involved in this incredible network and group of organizations?
Well, it's funny because I've shared this story before. I was really, I love nature since I was a child. And I think we've heard from a lot of speakers that it's often linked to like a core childhood memory. For me, it was summers spent in La Mauricie region in Quebec playing. I was obsessed with frogs and bullfrogs in general. And I could spend hours hunting for frogs and bullfrogs and toads and making giant toad houses. Despite having this incredible fascination for nature, I was really bad in science in school. It was terrible. I could not do math. I was bad in biology. I was bad. So I realized really quickly and really young that I was not going to have a path in science and I would not have this opportunity. But then I studied cinema and photography. And then I realized I could totally work in nature with a completely different path. And I was really lucky because I got a job at Parks Canada working in the Mingan Archipelago National Park Reserve as a photographer and a videographer. Yes, it's an absolutely stunning national park reserve on the St. Lawrence North Shore, if anyone has ever a chance to check it out. And that first summer, it was life-changing. And through photography, I had to learn about the park's biodiversity. I had to learn about the species that I was taking photos of and filming. And in a way, it kind of bridged that gap of knowledge. And I became a bit of a citizen science, like we've talked about before. And I learned so much through all these experiences. And then that first summer at Parks Canada. So yes, there you go. It's the highest concentration of limestone model life. And yeah, that first summer led to many more summers. I was a photographer in Cape Breton Highlands National Park, in Grasslands National Park in Saskatchewan. And I traveled to many national parks through different jobs. So that's kind of how I got my foot into this conservation world, despite not having that scientific background.
Cool story. We do programs with all sorts of conservationists, explorers, and whatnot all the time. And one of the big questions for kids is like, is there a path that I need to follow? Do I need to do biology in grade 10 and this and this and this and get all these grades? And it's like, no. If you want to be if you want to work at NASA, you can be an astronaut, or you can be in business or finance or accounting or law or communications or photography, like whatever. In all of these fields, there's so many different avenues to it. And I'm so glad you got the chance to do it. To the video storytelling approach, this is something we've had the chance to feature throughout these broadcasts. And what a beautiful place to cut your teeth on, getting to explore in such a meaningful way.
Yeah, I was 19 years old, had never left home, which is a big city, Montreal, and I ended up being teleported in this completely different landscape. And these summer job, like everyone that has an opportunity to like move somewhere completely different, it can be really scary when you're young, but yep. I don't know anyone who's regretted it. Of all the people I've met through my summer jobs, I've never met someone who regretted it.
I'm so glad you mentioned this because, again, that first leap is big, especially if you're young. If you're like 18, 19, that's like a huge transition. As someone who moved much later than that away from home for the first time, my mother was a big solace to me. Whenever you go, like those adventures can really shape you in a really profound way. And as you said, I've never run into anyone who's ever gone on an adventure like that and has come to regret it. It changes them. It changes how they view the world. It changes how they interact with people. And so thank you for sharing that so much. Sure. In theory, I'm going to bring back Isabel now, and hopefully the connection's working, and then we'll keep chatting together over the next little bit. But Isabel, take two. No. You know what? I find smacking my computer really hard works for me a lot. So you can try that if you'd like. I'll do some troubleshooting on camera with us together. Isabel, on the bottom of the screen, there's a little gear symbol that says settings. Within that, there's an audio tab, and sometimes toggling between the mic and speaker will like rejigger it and cause it to work. So I'm going to leave you with me so that I will hear you.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey.
Hello.
Yes.
Nice to have you.
Oh my God, amazing.
I'm so glad when the random advice that I throw out occasionally works. It doesn't happen very often. I just talk out of my hat all the time. Isabel, welcome to the program. I want you to know that Aleksa had a really nice story about how her love story got started. So the bar is very high. But if you'd like to share a bit of your backdrop, how you got interested in this, I'd love to hear the origin story, the superhero origin story.
I mean, I started at a camp, a sleepaway camp, as a camper when I was a teen, and that kind of trickled me to doing a leadership program there, and also becoming a staff member. So it's a sleepaway camp by the lake. You're in the forest. You're doing canoe camping. You're playing in the water in the forest, as I said. But yeah, I think that's really where it all started for me, and I really saw how we're all interconnected and how it's all it all comes back to one another. So I think that's where it all started for me.
In the programs over the last couple of days, one of the abiding themes is this idea that nature's a great space to foster those sorts of connections that otherwise wouldn't happen. Whether it's walks in the park with your friend, whether it's going to a sleepaway camp. I remember being a boy and being offered to go to a sleepaway camp, and I was like, no, I'm staying at home. And I regret not doing that. Everyone I know that didn't experience like that was so moved by it. So my first camp experience was actually in university. There was a Canada-China field course. It was 12 Canadians, 24 Chinese students, like from China, came over. And so we got to do like projects together. I got to teach them how to canoe, which was one of the great experiences of my life ever, because they'd never been in a boat like that. And they thought it was all going to tip, and it was great. And in so many instances like that, as you said, you do the experience and then you get to teach others. Like it moves you, it impacts you, and you gain these skills and this way of dealing and working with other people that you want to transfer to others, because everyone should have an experience like that. So I'm so glad you had that experience. It's so nice. I'm curious for you both. This is a question that's been a big theme over the course of the whole broadcast series. Is there a place now that you really find is important to you in nature that you get to go to on a fairly regular basis, daily perhaps? Aleksa, if there's a place that jumps to mind, I'd love to hear it.
Well, obviously the cottage that I mentioned where I passed most of my childhood, I still go on a regular basis. A place that I don't get to go to anymore, but that left a lifelong impression, is Grasslands National Park in Saskatchewan. It was really unexpected for me that I did not know much about Saskatchewan. I don't think a lot of people who grew up in Quebec, or like often it's not one of the provinces that will like think about visiting, but one of the one that has changed my life the most. And when I think about biodiversity and the sky and the landscape, and because the night sky in Saskatchewan, and especially in Grassland, which is a dark sky preserve, is something else. I often find myself like daydreaming about grasslands. But then in terms of the outdoors, someone else mentioned that earlier. I do have a giant dog that requires a lot of energy, and I spend so much time outdoors with my dog, and it is so wonderful to go outside all the time with him. And it's so yes, some of the landscape of Grasslands. Grasslands is a really unique place. It's also one of the quietest places on Earth.
Yes.
Yes, but because it's a quiet place, you actually hear a lot of things. It's kind of you can hear all the insects surrounding you and the breeze, and it's a very different immersive experience to be alone and just wait and listen in Grasslands National Park.
So first of all, Isabel, I will come to you in 2 quick seconds, but as someone who went to Grasslands, it's one of the last provinces I went to was Saskatchewan. And first of all, hear the insects. Yes, you drive your car around and there's like 8 trillion grasshoppers that are, and that's an exact figure, stuck in the grill of your car. It's quite astonishing how many bugs there are. But it's such a unique place between the bison. There were prairie dogs, which I grew up seeing prairie dogs on television. To see them live, you're like driving along the road, there's a prairie dog. Town is just such a moving experience. If anyone gets a chance to go to Grasslands National Park, and the town gateway to it on the western end is like something out of an old western. There's like a saloon and everything. It's great. So I'm so glad you had that experience and that you dream about it still. What a great additional story. Isabel, again, you know what? I'm going to go to you first next time, because Aleksa did set the bar really high with these great stories. It's too much fun. Is there a place that you get the chance to go to, or that you really think of as being particularly meaningful?
I mean, it's pretty predictable, but it is the camp that I went to as a child. Last year, even though I haven't been back in years, I went to volunteer, and every year they kind of throw an alumni weekend that we can come back and kind of relive that magic and wonder. So I think that's the emotions that come back whenever I'm there. And yeah.
And where is the camp? Set the scene for us.
It's in Quebec. It's in Saint-Sauveur. So it's maybe 40-50 minute drive from Montreal. And yeah, you're surrounded by huge lakes, and there's big valleys of forest, or you could go by the creek. There's so many different places that you can go there. And there's archery, rock climbing, kayaking, canoeing, paddleboarding, all of the sorts that you could kind of think of. So yeah. What about you?
For me, well, first of all, I will say that growing up in Ontario, getting the chance to go to places like that, like Algonquin Park, where you've got these forests and lakes, that just was sort of like my default, like nature. This is what it looks like. And for so much of the world, they have nothing like that at all, especially in the fall as it changes color. And so what a special place and opportunity to get to learn about. For me, I mean, my love story led me to where I live now. My wife and I both went on independent trips to Grossmore National Park in 2014. I went with my mom and like loved it and was telling everyone like everyone's going to go to Newfoundland. It's the best place ever. And she went with her family and loved it as well. And a job opened up for her here this year, and we said we could live near that. And so now we're in Corner Brook, Newfoundland, on the west coast, close to this incredible spot. The gem of, I love grasslands. Don't get me wrong, it's beautiful. I love Banff. Grossmore is like top tier national park in Canada. Really, really exciting place. So that's what jumps to mind, and it's special in general getting to. We just had Marina on a minute ago. Like the national park system in Canada and the parks of Canada, we pinch ourselves daily to have the amount of natural space that we do, and the quality of it, coast to coast to coast across the country. So I'm so glad you both mentioned that. Now I will note. Sarah's just joined us in the background too. So I'm going to ask one final question of the two of you, and then we'll bring on Sarah for a quickie interview before we get into our final home stretch of the day. Isabel, you get to go first this time. Is there, for someone who's watching this, we've got a lot of young people watching this, we've had a lot of young people participate. Is there a recommendation of how you can get started? Is it just to try things and accept and say yes when people offer you the opportunity to go to camps? Or what would you recommend to someone wanting to get into nature for the first time?
I think surrounding yourself with people who have the same interests. I think I've found a community and people who have this wanting to being outside and sharing their knowledge. And working at Parks Canada, actually recently found out about so many youth organizations that there are, so many programs offered for young people 14 to 30. So there really is those resources out there. It's just, you might do a little bit of digging, but it's out there.
I want to note just in a big thank you, because earlier we had like two 15-year-olds on. It was deeply strange to me thinking how old I was. And it's nice that you mentioned young people 14 to 30. I'm there for like 2 more months, and I want to think I'm young. Is there any recommendation you have as a final query together?
Yeah, there is no wrong way to enjoy nature. Enjoying nature doesn't mean going on a 5-day trek up a mountain. It's okay to enjoy nature in different scale and in ways that connect with you, who you are, and with your culture. If it's going out to a picnic in an urban park with your friends, that is enjoying nature. And you should just do what feels right for you, and you'll develop new ways of exploring nature, and you'll do the one that you're comfortable, and maybe you'll get out of your comfort zone, maybe not. And there is no scale. No matter how you connect with nature, you are doing it right, because it's about how you feel well in nature.
Well, I couldn't think of 2 better answers than those two. So thank you both ladies so much. I wish I had even more time with you, but I will note, and they're not paying me to say this. I know you're both from Parks Canada, Association Parks Canada. Parks Canada is just an amazing organization. Like there's so many amazing experiences, places, cultures that you can experience coast to coast to coast across this country. I really encourage anyone who's international to come visit Canada, hang out with us at Parks Canada. And if they live here, go and check them out for the first time. There's so much to explore and discover, and we really have a special country. Aleksa, Isabel, thank you both so much for joining me today. I really appreciate this, and kudos again for pulling together an incredible My Nature Love Story event as part of our Love Fest. We're covering Isabel's face by accident here. I'll bring us up that way. There we go. Perfect. Do check out the Love Fest site. Do contribute your own nature story. We'd love to hear from you all. And thank you both so much for joining us today. Thanks, ladies.
Thank you
Bye.
That was awesome.
So,
thanks, Jesse. Well,
I saw. Well, Sarah came back. Sarah's back now.
Oh, there we go. I'm going to disappear again and bring Sarah in. Hi, Sarah. Bye, Sarah.
Hi.
Nice to meet you. I'm sorry about the mix-up. This has been the most chaotic time zone shuffle extravaganza festival of all time. So we appreciate you being here, even if we've got a little bit less time together. I'm excited to hear a little bit about your story, learn about Paso Pacifico, and dive in together. So please, lay it on me. What is your organization all about?
Our organization is about human-centered conservation. So that means designing conservation efforts that really speak to people and help to solve everyday problems that people have related to livelihoods, related to human well-being and safety, opportunities in tourism. And we do this in Western Central America, in a region that is often overlooked for conservation. So we're about building wildlife corridors there through human-centered conservation efforts.
Yeah, what a special part of the world. We as an organization get the chance to feature some of the sea turtle work in Nicaragua in the broadcast that we do. And I know that you guys are involved with some saving of some really, really cool species. And you get kids involved in such a big way. And so how do you find kids respond to this? One of the things that we've been talking about in these broadcasts is the importance of getting people out into nature early to have these experiences, because it's such a moving way of connecting with both nature and one another. How do you get to do you find that in your work? And can you give us any examples that jump to mind?
Yeah, we have a program called the Junior Ranger Program, and we kind of lifted the idea from national parks programs in other countries. But the Junior Ranger Program is pretty special because we are taking kids who already live very close to nature, people who live in nature, but maybe they're from communities that have been traditionally marginalized by their societies, and who, even though they live close to nature, they don't know how valued they are as stewards of nature. And they do not realize maybe some of the things that make their place and where they live so unique. So it's an incredible experience to see the esteem of the children grow as they realize that they are very important to the future of these areas.
Well, this is the thing that we've had the chance to feature with so many of these conservation stories. And I remember growing up as a boy, conservation was like, here we are from Canada and the United States, and we've got all the answers, and we're coming to tell you how you should manage everything. And everything you've been doing so far is completely wrong, and here's our plan. And they were like shocked when people didn't absolutely jump on board with this. And so it's been so nice seeing that, taking in the needs of local communities and having people become invested as stewards of the land and ecosystem and species that live near them is, of course, the most effective approach. Because if you love what you live with, if you love that nature, you're inclined to protect it and you find value in it. This is something that we've had the chance to see through all these broadcasts, that you protect an ecosystem offshore, and now you have better fisheries to fish, and now you have an ecotourism industry, and now you have people that are there to protect it that otherwise might have exploited it because there were no other options for them. And so I'm so curious how this is built up. How big a community do you have now? How many people have been through your program over the years you've been running it?
We have over 1,000 graduates of our program. It's a year-long program. So kids 2 times a month are going on local field trips or participating in activities in the communities, the villages where they live. And then children who live in kind of mountain and forested areas get trips to the beaches to learn about the ocean, and vice versa. And we normally have anywhere between 100 and 150 junior rangers per year. And we look forward, we really want to expand this program to other geographies in Central America.
I want to say, sorry, having asked this question of a lot of people over the last few days, I'm expecting that we have 80 graduates, and that's amazing. If you can get to somewhere like that, 1,000 people, 100 to 150 every year is ridiculous. Holy, where are you expanding? Where, and can I come? Sounds like a great time. Just very exciting.
It's a great time. I mean, the one thing about our Junior Ranger program is it's really focused on the local children. One of the things that we find is kids in rural Central America, they have to work really hard in their households. And so for them to have the opportunity for fun every couple weeks is really valuable. Just relax, go out and explore and learn some new things. And we're expanding to Eastern El Salvador, where we have newer programs in landscape scale and community-based conservation. So that's where our next set of junior rangers will begin. So if you want to come to El Salvador, you're welcome.
I'm getting on the plane. It's going to be a few connecting flights from Deer Lake, Newfoundland, but I'll get there. Sarah, this is so much fun. I will be in touch after this. There's some broadcasting things we might be able to do together to inspire some kids, which would be very exciting. But I'm so curious. One of our big questions in this is we've had the chance to interact with so many like wildly passionate people like you, and I'm so curious how you got your start. Was it a nature experience in one of these places personally? Was it coming to this place as a visitor and seeing it for the first time? Was it none of the above and a completely different origin story? I'd love to hear how you got involved.
Well, I grew up in what's called the inland northwest of northwestern United States in Spokane, Washington. And there I grew up hiking and camping and going to the Rockies in Canada, and really fell in love with nature. And in my early 20s, I had the opportunity to move to Costa Rica for personal reasons, and it ended up studying biology there. And I fell absolutely in love with the tropics and also the Spanish language and the people of Central America. And so I ended up doing my doctoral research in Nicaragua in what is known as the tropical dry forest, an ecosystem that is globally threatened, and where, despite its level of threat, there are not a lot of conservation efforts there. And one of the reasons why people are hesitant or groups are hesitant to work there is it's what we call a human-dominated ecosystem, where in the dry tropical forest, there's a lot of agriculture, a lot of people, and so there's a lot of competition for the space and the area where we could practice conservation. And I feel that that is why a human-centered approach to conservation is needed to be able to combine conservation goals with addressing human needs. And so after graduate school, I decided to co-found Paso Pacifico with other colleagues and friends who are also working in the region.
What a special story and part of the world. By the way, someone growing up in Washington that's into hiking and being outdoors is so fantastically stereotypical. Anyone west of like Alberta, Idaho, Montana, like it's just, you're like always outdoors. I'm a Toronto boy. Like, you know, I walked in like the park and I did a 15-minute lap and I was like, whew, I'm winded, time to watch some TV. No surprises there. And the Spanish language, by the way, we've had 6 Spanish programs over the course of these broadcasts. I don't understand a word they're saying, and I'm like hanging on every word. It's such a beautiful language to listen to, and you can tell, I swear you can tell the enthusiasm just that much more. All the romantic languages are lovely that way. And I'm so glad you mentioned dry forest. Thank you for this, because I've had the chance to experience this in Madagascar. It's such a unique ecosystem, and it's again a place that there as well is so human dominated, and people burn it down to get charcoal for their fires. They hunt the animals there to, you know, provide food for their families. And so it becomes this challenging, multifaceted conservation struggle, but it all begins with incorporating the local community, having people become invested in protecting this area and seeing the value in things alive rather than dead. And it sounds like you've done just a spectacular job of that, Sarah. So kudos to you. And I encourage all the people to check out your amazing website below too.
Thank you.
Now, time flies and you're having fun, unfortunately. So I have one more question before we wrap up and head to our next speaker. And that is just for people that are coming up in the conservation space, the storytelling space, is there a way to start that really impacted you? Maybe you saw it with someone when you went to Costa Rica for the first time. Maybe it's something that you learned, you know, creating Paso Pacifico. But how would you recommend people get involved and begin when the challenges seem so overwhelming? Like it seems so big. How do you get started to have an impact the way that you have?
I think the first start is having that love for nature and really feeling it deep inside, that you experience and feel it, every sensation, the smell, the sounds of birds, the smell of the ocean, the sound of the dirt under your feet when you walk, all of those things that really generate a deep multisensory love is what will enable you to work and get involved in conservation. And then second to that is finding very small ways to get involved. Almost everywhere we live around the world, there are local efforts to protect, whether it's like a creek in your backyard or a entire watershed, or to participate in cleanups, or to assist in environmental education in local schools. But there really are not a shortage of opportunities, and oftentimes more opportunities come when you see small opportunities. So that would be my suggestion.
That is a beautiful message, one that's been echoed by a lot of our speakers over the last few days. And I must admit, when I was a boy, when people talked about it that way and the importance of this sort of sensory immersion in nature, it was thought of as flaky. I mean, I don't know if you remember this experience, or people ever felt that way when you were talking about it, but it was like, oh, that's not the way to approach it. It's the science. We've got to save this many species, and here's why, and here's how. And to see so many people across the spectrum of our 6 continents we featured say that love begins with these concepts that are increasingly becoming popular and recognized. The peace you feel when you go into a forest, the feel of a leaf, the immersion of literally jumping into the ocean or a creek or a stream or a lake. And I mean, that's what moves you to feel as passionate as you are to want to do the other step. I think David Attenborough said it best. You can start by saying, save the whales, you lazy bugger, what are you doing? Or you can say, look at the whales and how amazing they are. And the other part follows. And it's so exciting to see that put into practice. And I thank you so much for joining the Love Fest and being a part of this, sharing your story. And I wish you the very best expanding into El Salvador. I'll have to head down. I'm very excited.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for inviting me here. And it's been a joy to be part of this Love Fest.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure we find more ways of getting your organization linked with some of the other amazing partners in this network. Certainly from the Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants angle, there's a lot that we can do together to help inspire even more kids. So I will be in touch in the days to come. You can rest assured. And I wish you a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day till then.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, folks, we are in our final home stretch extravaganza. This is not the ultimate, the final program. It's not even the penultimate. It's the third last. But after 45 plus broadcasts over the last day and a half, it is very exciting just the same. It's my last broadcast as host today, after waking up at 3 a.m. to get us started with some amazing stories in Africa. And I'm really excited to bring in my Nature for All coordinator counterpart. So as you all know, this is our Nature for All festival of programs, the Love Fest specifically, this incredible 2 weeks of events. I get to serve as the Canadian coordinator. I feel like I'm like 8th down the totem pole of people that are doing really amazing stuff for Nature for All in Canada. There's a lot of great stuff going on, especially with the Parks Canada team, but it's still a pleasure and a thrill to get that designation. And I am keen to welcome in my counterpart in the United States, Heather Kuhlken, who is the director of Families in Nature, founder director of Families in Nature, I should say, with her fancy bio there on the bottom. And so welcome to the Love Fest. So nice to have you here today.
Thanks so much for having me, Jesse. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear. Our tech is mercifully perfect. We're killing it now. We've had it's been kind of a fun day. You never know what you're going to get with the tech and audio and video, but that's half the fun of video broadcasting, I think. So this is great.
It is. I can't believe you've been doing it since 3 a.m.
Jose took over for a big section in the middle. I give him all the credit. Kudos to Jose for everything that he's done throughout the program today. But yes, it's been so much fun to get to hear from so many amazing and inspiring people. And I'm curious, and this is something we've been asking all our people, is tell us a little bit more about your organization to begin with. And then I'd love to hear how it got its start and where you got your start. If there's a particular experience or moment in nature that was really impactful for you that led to your passion to create something like Families in Nature.
Well, Families in Nature, let's see, I founded it, I made it up in 2008. And I saw that as a science teacher and a parent, that we really needed more connection to nature, more time outside, and more time with family. We also needed more time doing science that's not indoor science, but is instead wet outdoor science. And so I wanted to take families outside and teach them science. No one really realizes they're learning when they're out with us. I call it sneaky science. So it's for all ages, all together, and in a family setting. And family means whatever to us that it means to you. It's all inclusive of whatever that word means. And so we take people outside, and ultimately my whole job is to help them fall in love with nature.
What a cool gig that is. That sounds like the best time ever. And by the way, thank you so much for giving me the gift phrase of the entire festival as wet science. I appreciate that so much. I really do encourage your audience, check out familiesinnature.org. You have some of the best resources of any organization I've ever seen, and we get the chance to feature them on Nature for All, of course, but just spectacular stuff, images and stories that you've had the chance to bring kids out on in the years, in the past years. One thing I saw recently, I'm going to go back to serious questions in a minute, but I'm going to go on tangents because I have all the power and I can go wherever I want. I saw this amazing picture that you shared the other day of you out with a bunch of kids in canoes out on the water near a bridge. And can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because I love these personal stories as sort of a bridge into the Love Fest idea.
Well, I'm not sure exactly which one. We take a lot of people out in canoes pretty often. We've got a fleet of 8 canoes.
Nice.
And then we also have partnerships all over the city and in fact, the state and in other states to take people outside. I've even taken them as far away as Costa Rica to tag baby hammerhead sharks with our partner organization, Mission Tiburon there. So we've gone everywhere from locally to far, far away. But probably that photo was watching the bats. Austin has the largest urban bat colony in the world, and we have Mexican free-tail bats that live under Congress Bridge here, and we take families that have never been in a canoe, have never been outside, and we teach them to canoe on the water while they're going. I get about 20 teen volunteers to help me teach, and other adults to help us teach, and pair up one teen with each boat and take probably 100 people at a time out to canoe 2 miles down to the bridge, watch the bats come out from under the bridge, and then canoe back in the dark. And
Fantastic.
so after they do that, they feel safe going and renting a canoe on their own, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, I've been sharing the story over the last couple of days of the fact that I did a course in university where we had Chinese students come over from China to Canada, and I got to teach them how to canoe. Teaching people how to canoe is such a fun experience. It's so cool to see people in the boat the first time, and oh, it's so tippy, and then you get confident, and you end up looking like one of the Voyagers, like going down the river, and it's just such a fantastic time, and especially with the bats. So I put up this link. I've had the privilege of getting to do some really spectacular nature experiences in my life. And there's very few examples in the world of really amazing urban nature experiences. Austin, I think, is the top. I would come to Texas just to see your bats, basically. And I hope I get that chance one day. And I'll have to come out on the river with you guys to do it.
Yeah, you're always welcome to come join us.
Thank you kindly.
They're here from April to October.
Okay, good to know. We've got I got over a month to go now, so I'll bide my time in the winter. Try not to get snowed in my house, and we'll go from there. So, Heather, is there a story that led you to this? Like, is there an experience of yours, or did you grow up in a way that you were connected to nature that led to your inspiration to create Families in Nature?
There is. I'm not sure if we can technologically do it, but I actually made a little slideshow.
Yes, we can. Well, this is my job in life. So if I fail at this, we're in big trouble. But on the bottom of your screen, there's the present button.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it brings up a bunch of options, too many options. Just press share screen.
Okay.
Yeah. And then it's going to bring up another box just to throw you off. Gives you the option of Chrome tab, window, or entire screen. If you pick entire screen, yeah. Click the picture of the entire screen that's in the box, and it'll turn the share button blue on the bottom right of the box. And
okay.
Once you've done that, I should see it instantly.
Chrome has lost permission to capture.
You know what we can do? So basically, if you want to do this, you can go into security and privacy and undo it and bring up your PowerPoint that way. And what I can do is Jose shared with me this amazing clip of you, of one of the bat paddles that I can play if you want to go and give yourself permission to share screen on Chrome and come right back. You can do that if you'd like.
Oh, let's see. Chrome. There we go.
Thinking about it. Here, I'll play this while we're doing it because it's your 3-year-old in the water that's just having the best time of her life. So I'll play this while we're trying to get it up together, okay? So this is an example of the bat paddle. 3-year-old, 16 seconds of glory. We'll play this.
Oh my gosh. Look at this fatty. Whoa. Yes, it is amazing. Whoa, it's going to the circle and look like a cloud.
Well, that's fulfilling. By the way, I sound that exact same way when I see animals of any kind. It's just the best thing ever. Awesome.
That's
Okay.
so fun.
How's it going with the screen sharing? And
Let's
worst
see. I
case,
think we got it. We'll see.
you got it. You did. Voila.
Oh my
There's
goodness.
I know. It's very meta. Plus into the infinite distance. And then we'll
How's
just
this?
go full screen and we'll be all set. Perfect.
All right. So
Yeah, play from start in theory.
there we go.
And,
How does that
hey,
look?
look at that. Perfect.
So this is how I started out. I was one of those kids that was always outside and went fishing with my dad. My grandmother had a house that had a chimney that raccoons and flying squirrels and all kinds of things would fall down through, and we would raise them because the parents usually wouldn't come back and get them. We would try, and then it didn't work. And so then I grew up in Houston, Texas, though, so right in the middle of the city, even though I was outside all the time. I camped all the time until I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. And so then I became a biologist, and I went to Mexico and studied in Baja. I studied marine mammals. That's my sleeping bag in the top corner there, underneath a rock ledge, trying to not get pooped on by bats and storm petrels. And I studied marine mammals and sea lion feeding behavior and sustainable fisheries biology. And then I taught in Key Largo. I also am an underwater photographer, so these are some of my photos. So I don't know, can you see those, Jesse?
Oh yeah, they're gorgeous. We got this nudibranch in the bottom left, and I just said that because I want you to tell us what a nudibranch is for someone who doesn't know.
Yeah, so that's a nudibranch. They have breathing apparatus or kind of gills on the back, which is that orange part sticking up, and they are gorgeous. And a whale shark in the middle, and then that's me with a sea turtle in the top corner. And the dolphins are actually in Palau, which is my favorite place to go diving. And then while I was in college, I actually have published research on grackle behavior. And so this is my great-tailed grackle friend that I took a photo of on the Texas coast. And so when I was teaching as an undergrad, my favorite thing was teaching outside. And I decided instead of becoming a field biologist, what I wanted to do was take kids outside and teach them outdoors. So I was a teacher in the classroom for a few years, but then I decided what I really wanted to do was teach science outside where they could see it and touch it and smell it and immerse themselves into it, to foster the next generation of conservationists. But then I had children. So these are my kids growing up in nature. They started camping at about 5 weeks old in the youngest's case, and learning to be a taco with the red dress wrapped around. And that right-hand picture is me with my youngest child, who's now 13, I was teaching shelter building and doing orienteering races with him in that front pack.
Nice.
And the middle picture, he's actually at the bottom of a climbing wall outside at Enchanted Rock. So I started taking my own family outside, and travel and outdoor time became a huge part of our family life. And I really, really wanted to make sure other people could do this too. And so I don't know if you can tell, but my oldest child is on top of that manta ray, and the bottom one, the manta, is about 1 foot from his belly. And so during all of our travel and taking other families outside with us, I took more photographs. So I moonlight as a nature photographer. But I really, really wanted to make sure that everyone had access to nature. And to time together with families. So I started taking families out every other weekend and have been doing maybe not quite as much guiding now that we're a nonprofit. I do more working than guiding outside, but I do still teach. And it's been so amazing to grow up with this community. So these are the families I've been camping with. This is a section of them. We've got lots of nature communities, but this is one of them that I've been running since 2008. And we work a lot on Nature for All and making sure everyone feels included and invited and like they belong in nature, because really nature needs everyone and everyone needs nature. And so here's just some of the things that we've done. So
fantastic. Heather, good. I mean, well, I love the story of quite literally Nature for All and making sure that we get people of all kinds, of all backgrounds out to nature. I remember growing up when I saw like the parks posters, it was like a man who looked like an older version of me. He's got like a silver beard and there's his, wife, and then there are two super white children, and there they go off into nature together. And for me, it was like, cool, I can do that. But if you don't look like that, if you don't have that backdrop, that can be a bit of a disconnect for you, where you don't feel that there's space for you. And it's been so heartening to see so many organizations, government, NGO alike, that are starting to be like, look, no matter where you come from, if it's your first time coming to Canada, the United States, and you come from a place where there's no culture of camping and going out and being outdoors, there's a space for you, and there's a skill that you can develop, and there's a relationship that you can build both with the natural world and with people. And so heartening to see that come to fruition. Is there, I mean, you must have many, and this is a hard thing to answer on the spot, I suppose, but is there any example that you can share of sort of a kid or a family coming out for the first time with you that really jumps to mind?
Yes, and I even have a photo for that.
Of course you do.
So, because one thing that we do is we do try to show other people in nature who are not classically in the 1990s and early 2000s REI ads and North Face ads. We really want to make sure people see themselves in nature. So I donate a lot of my photography to magazines and other places,
right,
because I do have the photos of families that we're taking out. And so part of the goal of what we do is to actually show those faces that we don't typically see. And so here is a good story. Let's see. Perfect.
I'll wait till you bring it up so we don't see ourselves maybe 7 times in a row this time. There we go.
I don't know why it always goes back to the beginning.
That's the way of it sometimes. Well, while you're doing that, I'll share the link that Jose brought up of your photography. If people want to see Heather's moonlight talents, you can check that out at kuhlkenphotography.com.
Yeah, here's the baby gray whale in the top that came and looked at us
when
we were there.
Marvelous.
So, okay, going through, here we go. So this is my favorite camp out story maybe ever. We took families from Austin, which is 3.5 hours from the Texas coast, and we drove them to, well, they drove themselves. We guided them to Galveston State Park, which is one of their favorite places to camp. And a few of the families had never, ever been there with us before or there at all. And this particular family had never touched sand or seen the ocean at all. Wow. And that is my absolute favorite thing to do, is to show people the ocean, because it's where my heart lies in nature, is underwater, as obvious from the photos. But we were walking out, and in Galveston, you camp kind of behind the sand dunes and the grass, and then you can walk through the dunes to the ocean. So from the campsite, you can't really see the water because it's over the dunes. And this family, this little girl was walking through, and she reached down and picked up, just on the path, a handful of sand. And she said in Spanish, "It's so soft." She had no idea how soft sand was. And then she and her sister and her mom ran out onto the beach just as the sun was fading, and they clasped arms and they just started spinning around in the waves right there. And I took a picture, even though it was quite dark. And as they were just showing their complete joy at seeing the ocean for the first time. And then about 20 minutes later, one of the teens came over and showed me that that one of the families had written "Amo a mi familia" in the sand. And so I took a picture of that as well. So I thought,
That's about as nice a story as you get. By the way, very few people have photographic evidence of their favorite story in nature. You're the first one in quite some time. So thank you for that very much. And what a...
Of course I do.
Of course you do. But and it's so nice. I think both of us had this opportunity to experience so many different landscapes and nature stories and places when we were younger. But in Newfoundland, my example of this is we have a lot of West African students and Southeast Asian students that come to the university here. And Newfoundland's in like a major snow belt, like incredible, unbelievable snow. And it's their first time experiencing snow. And that's such a odd, like growing up in Canada, it was like, oh yeah, there's snow, it's winter, that's what winter is, right? And as opposed to monsoon season, and you come and there's like 5 feet of snow on the ground, and you can jump and do snow angels, throw snowballs at each other, and that's such a beautiful thing. I think everyone connects over that, and this is something that we keep coming back to throughout the Love Fest, is that nature provides this space where people can, you know, build their relationships, build their skills, build themselves in a way that they don't get to in any other format or place. And so I'm so glad you've had that experience and get that to feature so many people. How many people have come through your program since you were founded? Paso Pacifico is over 1,000, by the way. That's who you're competing against, is the people before you. Pressure.
So since 2008, I actually don't know, because we didn't start counting until we became a nonprofit, which was in 2015. Well, December of 2014. Yeah. And so I would say, well, I can say this. We've been counting the number of hours in nature that we have taken people to, and we have roughly 240,000 hours in nature, with probably, I don't know, I think we counted our attendance. Duplicate people, it's harder to count, like individuals. I know that last year we had 1,100 unduplicated participants, but probably since 2015, I think we counted about 16,000 attendees.
Outstanding.
It's somewhere 1,000 to 5,000 attendees per year.
I am both in awe. I'm in awe, and I love the thought that someone might have theoretically come in. As you said, we have 1,100 unduplicated people, because it just brings to mind clones, and it just makes me very happy.
Well, we have lots of families that come several times a year.
Yes, of course. I know. I know. I'm on board. For people that are new to getting out in nature, that have maybe grown up in a big city as a child for a very long period of time, is there a stepping stone, thing that you've seen really works for people to get them out in nature for the very first time?
Oh my gosh, yes. I think that the most important thing I try to teach our guides and teach teachers in the classroom that we do trainings for is fall in love with nearby nature. Let kids go outside and fall in love with a pill bug or a bird in the backyard, even if it's a super common bird. Like here we have cardinals and grackles and things like that. Fall in love with what's nearby and don't scare them. We focus very heavily on teaching from a perspective of hope. Yep. That this is, the problems that are facing the world today are solvable, and humans are so incredibly creative. We've brought species back from extinction, or back from the edge of extinction. And we want to tell kids those stories and help them feel a love of nature before they fear connecting to it. Because if you tell a kid polar bear, they're going to be terrified because they don't think polar bears and tigers will exist by the time they're 20 or 30 years old. Yep. So focus on loving things that are really close by and fostering that love of nature. It's the foundation of all of conservation.
Yep. Well, on the dark note, and I'll take it back positively in a second, it was so interesting. We had these two 15-year-olds on earlier today, and the question was like, how did you get into this? And they were like, it was the thought that everything was going to die. Yeah. Like, that's the question. It was like, oh, I mean, I'm a millennial. I'm not even that much older, but to hear Gen Z kids, that like, that's their motivation, is like, you know, look what you've done and what we stand to lose. And that's, I mean, it worked for them. They're doing amazing stuff, but it's like, it feels like a terrible motivation to begin when there is so much positive going on. If you take the broad stroke, there are some really negative things happening in the world and a lot of challenges that are going to face, but you hear the stories of people in broadcasts like these, and it's so incredible to see the level of the passion, enthusiasm, hard work that's been put into making the world a better and brighter place. On the local wildlife note, and this is something that you know, and I'm the host, so I can make shameless plugs whenever I want. But I do encourage our audience to check out Backyard Bio. This is something that we do every May, literally to get kids around the world out exploring their local neck of the woods. Go literally in your backyard, find the centipedes in your house if you're in Toronto and live in a basement growing up, and there's tons of centipedes. That was my childhood in a nutshell. Whatever lives near you, document it, share it with people, because whether it's you finding out something for the first time that you didn't know was there, or you're connecting with kids elsewhere and you get to show off wildlife near you. You get to have the virtual example of people discovering sand for the first time. Like if you're a Canadian kid or if you're a Texan and you get to talk with kids in Ghana or Australia and hear what they have in their backyards and how different that is, that's a really moving, powerful thing. And then it's so exciting. So we'll have some fun on that, Heather.
Well, and also going outside to look at what's in your own backyard and actually spending a few quiet moments, not looking at your screen, but instead going out and noticing the wildlife in your own backyard is its own health. It has its own health benefit.
Good time.
Because you're not only noticing things around you and taking one of those quiet moments away from stimulation and constant input, but also you're connecting to the things that are close by. We need to broaden our definition of nature to include picnics in the park, a walk around the neighborhood, going out and growing plants on a balcony in an apartment building or in a schoolyard. We do campus campouts where we take people camping on their school campuses and focus on that nearby nature piece. Camp in your own backyard. There's a lot of wildlife. My kids love to find rough earth snakes in our backyard and run around with them and then put them back. So
I would love that too. I'm a snake guy. That's very enticing to me. And by the way, the fact that you cued the birds telepathically to start chirping as you were making that message was really on point. So well done in the broadcast. But yes, it's nature can be where you find it. Not all of us have this opportunity to go to the Amazon rainforest or Serengeti or be in a really special spot with tons of biodiversity. But no matter where you live on this planet, there are amazing living things near you. And this is something that you do so well. Jose's mentioning that Chatty had a coyote in his backyard yesterday. And like
a fox. We had a fig tree, which is kind of right behind me. And we came home from out of town for 2 weeks and a fox had taken up residence under the trampoline in the backyard. And I live right in the middle of Austin, like definitely big, busy streets all around me. And this fox was gobbling figs. So we put out a game trap camera in the middle of Austin in the backyard and caught it eating figs.
Vickie's in the background, our next speaker. And Vickie, if you want to chime in the chat of any apex predators that were in your backyard as well, we'd love to hear from you. If there's like a bear or like a random tiger on the loose, who knows? But what a cool experience. And this is something that we love to feature is urban wildlife. We've had the chance to talk about this quite a bit. Tamara was on earlier talking about the amazing wildlife in Mexico City, one of the biggest metropolises in the world. She's had the chance to feature. And it sort of underpins a lot of what we're trying to do as organizations is make sure that people feel that connection no matter where they live and no matter where they're from. So Heather, you're doing such an amazing job with this. Time flies when you're having fun. We got a couple more minutes before we wrap up, so I'm going to finalize with one more question before I bring back in Jose for the final two interviews of the Love Fest. It's like bittersweet because it's so exciting, but also, it's been such a great time. I don't want to leave it. Heather, is there a favorite place for you personally? You had the chance to show your kids growing up with you, doing amazing stuff. You get the chance to go with people and introduce them to nature the first time. Is it the Magic Bat Bridge? Is it the place where you took your kids the first time? Is it maybe the local scuba diving place you get the chance to go most often? Like, what is your favorite spot in the natural world?
Oh my gosh. Well, of course I have a few. My favorite everyday spot is probably my screen porch, which I'm sitting on right now. But I'm a huge fan of anywhere underwater. I don't really care where, but anywhere underwater, preferably clear water, but But I would say my kids and I have gone to Pinellas Falls State Park to go camping probably 30 plus times. And so that state park holds some connection to place for both my kids and I. I was going to tell you that at the end of the day, the work of Families in Nature is to connect people to nature and help them fall in love with nature. And as the basis of all of conservation, I like to say that I have the happiest job in conservation because I just have to help people love nature. And And that includes myself. So
It's pretty fun. It doesn't feel like work. Like most of the people in this broadcast, that could be the subtitle for the Love Fest series. Here's a bunch of people that don't have jobs at all. Like, we just get to love what we do all the time and have so much fun with it. And I pinch myself daily, sometimes literally, about the work that I get to do. And it's so nice to get to inspire and excite people this way about something that is so near and dear to our hearts. And I really appreciate you sharing all these stories with us today, Heather. This has been such a fun interview. My first time getting to interview you. This is great.
I know. It was so good to talk to you. Thanks for this opportunity.
Well, I can't stress enough. I've been bringing it up on the broadcast every 10 seconds on the 10, but familiesinnature.org, if you want to learn more, check out their amazing resources. There's so much more. And then, of course, your photography too. Moonlight gig. You can check it out, culkenphotography.com. Lots to explore there. Thank you so much again, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, we'll say farewell to Heather because time knows no bounds, and we are set to bring in our next speaker, our second last penultimate broadcast of the Love Fest. But first, I'm going to reintroduce Jose, spearheader, organizer of the whole shebang. I bow down to thee. Jose, welcome back to the program, and it's so nice to have you here to wrap it all up.
Well, thanks, Jesse. You know what? I do want to say this could not have happened without you. There is no way. We have the platform. You were up this morning at 4 o'clock in the morning doing some interviews with folks in Africa. And so, that was amazing for me because I could sleep. So I'm extremely grateful. And I did manage, and while you were doing some of these interviews, I did go out and, take a walk in my neighborhood and enjoy some, snow and some nature. So that, I was able to rejuvenate from that. So I'm extremely grateful for you to be a participant in this.
Thank you so much. It's been a real honor and pleasure. I get the chance to do broadcasts for a living, and this has still been one of the most fulfilling, amazing events I've ever had the chance to be a part of. I'd never talked to someone in Benin before. Eve was amazing. So thank you for ticking off another country off my virtual list. I'm at like 95 so far or something. So what a pleasure. And I hope the last few sessions of the festival go spectacularly. Again, if people want to check out Love Fest, all the speakers, all the broadcasts, they're all recorded forever. And do check out Jose's final two as I leave him to it. Thanks so much, man.
Thanks, Jesse. We'll catch you soon. I'm actually really excited for our next guest because I had the opportunity to meet her extremely briefly one time. And I keep going back to a lot of the work that she's done. And she's actually one of it's been interesting. Like we do a lot of work, we think it's global and there's a global event with climate change, etc. But a lot of the work and the effort is done at an extremely local level. And I think our next guest has taken that to heart, and she's been doing some amazing work. And so I'll bring her on. Vickie, I don't know if you remember. Hi, how are you? Oh, your volume is, your mic's off. Let's just unmute. There we go.
I'm muted to be a polite guest. And
oh, well, that's okay. So Vickie, I don't know if you recall, but we met in Renfrew during COVID, and it was winter time, and it was brief, but there must have been something because I really connected, and like I said, I keep going to the work that you've been doing whenever we go out now into nature. You're my go-to source. And I'm really excited to have you on the show because I think the work that you've done is amazing. But I do want to know, and I know a little bit about your background, but I don't know a lot, just what I've read on your website. And I think it's a really interesting path that led you to what you're doing now. And so, but I'll even start a little further, maybe if we can, and talk a little about that first connection with nature for you, and then how that's led and what the path has been to where you are now. So if we can even go as far back as possible, I think that's might be interesting.
oh my goodness. I am the poster child for not taking a direct path in anything. So I don't think I'm the opposite of most nature lovers nowadays. I didn't grow up camping. I didn't grow up loving the outdoors. I never did, group sports. None of those things happened.
Right.
I was actually like an arts kid that loved dance class and art and those things. And of course I grew up, in the, there goes the video for a second. I grew up in the 80s and 90s where you're kicked outside for most of the day anyways. But as I became an adult, what I come to love doing is wandering for my mental health. So I would end up going on long car rides and drives without knowing where on earth I was going. I had a whole day window, and it was normal to come back 8-10 hours later and maybe discover a new trail or a new waterfall or a new coffee shop or any of those things. And it's through wandering that I discovered nature.
Nice. That's it. And that didn't happen like when you were 4 or 5. That probably happened later on in life, right?
That happened like in my 30s. It was I became a wanderer like in my 20s and traveled the world and did these things. But it wasn't until I was home again in Ottawa and in Ontario and started enjoying road trips that this connection was made.
And so you've taken this wandering specifically, but you've also taken it into like a wellness approach. Like it's called Girl Gone Good, and I will want to ask you about the name because I think that's got probably a really interesting story. But tell me a little bit about what Girl Gone Good is and the wellness aspect as well, because I think that's probably a very important part of what you do.
Yeah, it is. It really is. So girlgonegood.com is a hiking resource website. That's its primary business. I just wanted to have one-stop shop for everyone to go for information, local information on trails and stuff like that. And it's an accidental business or organization, whatever you want to call it. It was not on purpose. It actually started out as I started posting smoothie recipes. That's how it started. And it wasn't until I had people ask like, hey, you found a trail somewhere. Where was that? Or,
right.
Hey, I've got little kids. I'd like to take them into nature. I saw you went somewhere on the weekend.
What was that like?
What was that like? Where was it? And I found myself repeating myself. So I was like, well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I just posted about it on a website. I wouldn't have to repeat myself, and I could share this with more people and entice their curiosity. Yeah. So that's
and this is in Ottawa. Like you would think like that there's a lot of trails, and I know because I've seen most of them on your website now, but you would think like there should be a lot of information about these already.
So there is, but what we have in Ontario is the thing is we have different levels of land managers and landowners. That's the issue.
Yeah.
We have tons of wonderful trails, and all the land managers have these wonderful websites with their own standard trail reports, but there's no one-stop shop for all the trails. There's no one trail finder map in Ottawa. You've got bloggers, you've got the trail managers, you've got the different levels of government that own, different properties. And I thought, well, why don't we put that in one place and not put it in one place so that everyone could come to me, but put it in one place and highlight the trail managers and start sharing what the different land types are.
Right. And so you found your niche, right? Like there was a little niche that you saw, there's a need for this. And I think that's amazing. And so you created this network of connection of trails and highlighting these amazing resources that are out there. But it wasn't just about, getting people out hiking and finding these places. There's another component to kind of the method to your madness is here's all the trails, but you go out hiking and ...
Yeah. I want people to care about themselves. Like I have a really strong ethos on the website where I want people to connect to nature, like to themselves, to others, and to nature. And those are the three pillars that I want people to connect to in age. Because nowadays we are so busy and we're so inundated with input. I find nature's our remedy. Nature's our remedy for that. And how well nature does is how well we do, and vice versa. Like we're connected, and I want people to realize that connection again, even if it's in the city, Yeah.
So your trail network now has expanded to, how far do you go? Like you're based in Ottawa. capital of Canada, but you're not just limited yourself to, you know, the network of trails. Like you broadened a little bit. Like, I guess maybe start with, you know, where did it start, and then where's it going to end?
Well, I have a good idea on the ending, so that's not so bad. But it started because I was like, oh, well, I've got a website. I'm going to create this list of all the trails I know within 2 hours of Ottawa so that people have diversity in their options of trails. Because what happened in our area, especially during the pandemic, is that people only knew about the trails they knew. And those trails were getting inundated with traffic, and it was hurting the local flora and fauna. And it wasn't good for our trails.
Right.
It also wasn't great for the counties surrounding the city because they're not seeing the traffic that they needed. So let's highlight all the trails. So I said, oh, okay, I'll create a resource for that. And I actually put it on my website for free. And it had about 100 trails on it. And then in 24 hours, it had like over 2,000 downloads in 24 hours. And I quickly ripped it right off the website.
Yeah.
Not because I wanted to keep it for myself, but I quickly realized I would still maintain its accessibility, but this is a great way for me to fulfill my need to give back to community in a philanthropic way.
Right.
That I could create this guidebook and start generating funds that I could donate back to conservation and mental health.
Right, because you saw the need, the demand for it, obviously.
It was just, I'm an accidental author of a reference
trail guide.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
That's funny. And so you took it down. You had 100 trails, and then what? Then what happened?
And then it just started growing. So I made this book and started selling it different places, mostly online from the website. And it went really well. And we're now on the 4th edition of the book with over 260 trails, I think, in it. And it's trails within 2 hours of Ottawa. That's the current range. And 260 trails is a lot of options for folks to go and explore. So it is diversifying, I can never say that word, the options for everyone to go out and explore. It's increasing the accessibility of the trails because people could pick the right trails for them.
Right.
It's a way to support the counties because I get to promote them. It's a way to support responsible recreation because all my content material has responsible recreation and leave no trace principles spattered throughout it.
Yeah.
And it was a way for me to donate back to community. So for me, it was a win all around.
Yeah. So you said 260 trails, I think, right? So have you actually you've hiked those 260 trails, or not quite, but you've hiked a fair amount. Like I've seen your Facebook accounts and you're like, it seems like you're constantly out hiking.
Yes, except for the busy times. The busy times I'm writing about hiking more than I am hiking, but there's a good 180 trails that I've gone out on myself.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, when you leave your house in the morning and you go on a hike, what's that process and what's the feeling you get when you leave and then when you get there? I'm curious from your perspective because I have my own little story related to that, but I want to hear yours first.
So mine is never about the hike. It's the freedom of the day. So for me, I always have in my car, and I hope that my car never gets broken into. So if anybody knows my car, don't go near it. But in my car, I always have my day pack packed, my post-hike bag, and a car kit. And those are always in my car.
Right.
Because when I go out on the weekends or on a free day, I never, ever know if I'm hiking and where I'm hiking.
Really?
I just set off in a direction and go.
Nice.
And if I happen upon a trail,
you'll stop.
I'll stop and I'll go hike
and see what's there.
Yeah.
You're a little bit after my own heart, and not for trails, but I remember I would go into a city I'm visiting, and this was before phones, right? So I'm dating myself, but we would grab the map from wherever we had a map, and we would fold it up and put it in our pockets and start walking. And then we would look down one street and look down the other street and go, that side looks more fun, and so, or more interesting, so we would go down that street, and then we turn left, we turn right, we go, wherever it would lead us. And then after about 3 hours, we'd open up the map, look where the street signs are, and go, okay, where are we, and where's our hotel, where's our hostel, where are we staying, and then make our way back. It sounds like you've got a little bit of that adventurous component as well, right?
I also think it's a lost art that we need to spark a whole other slew of health benefits, right? So that if we're so stuck in our day-to-day agenda and our routines, and we always take the same way to work, and we always take the same way to our family's house. And gone are the days of having the time to wander, to build that curiosity, the confidence, the troubleshooting that comes with wandering the countryside.
Yeah.
Like to just.
Yeah. And I love my job at Parks Canada, don't get me wrong. But where I live, I'm not quite on the Rideau River, but I can see it from my house, right? And across the river, there's a couple of buildings, and there's jobs, obviously. And I've always thought, wouldn't it be cool to be able to just kind of like, you know what, I'm just gonna paddle to work this morning because it's right there. And I lived in Yellowknife for 10 years, and a lot of my friends lived on the houseboats, and that's what they did. They paddled across the lake. That was part of their daily routine. And I think that's, like you said, it's an amazing experience to be able to do that, I think. And just to wander and just to kind of do something different.
Well, it's that sense of freedom, but it also is that sense of even hiking a trail that you normally hike in a different direction or in different weather. It just gives us a different perspective. It grounds us in a different way, and it sparks our creativity. And I think that's lacking in our very structured digital age.
Yeah. Well, and even hiking it in a different state of mind, I think, and my kids are 15 and 12, and they don't mind hiking. I don't say they love hiking, but they like it when it's a loop, because they don't like to retrace their steps. Whereas for me, I don't mind, because as you're walking one way, you're seeing a rock face, you're seeing, different things. But when you walk backwards, it's a completely different experience, because it's different perspective. Maybe you're walking one way and it's a valley down there that you're walking towards a lake. But on the way back, there's different vistas to view. And my kids always ask, what's there to do at the end of the hike?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you get that a lot, right? And so tell me a little bit about, how you set up your trail guides so that people like me, because I use your guide. I remember you gave me a copy of your guide, and I still have it, and I need to, and I've been promoting it, and I know some people bought it, and you're on your fourth, and I still have it. I think I don't know if it was your first or second, so I do need to go buy the updated version, because I think I have maybe like 100 trails on there, so I need to expand. But tell me a little bit about, the work that gets done from that perspective to really engage the users of these trails.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I could talk an hour on that concept.
You've got 13 minutes.
13 minutes. Okay. No pressure. So here's what I think sometimes we get wrong with promoting the outdoors is sometimes, not always, but here's how I've reverse engineered it. If we want folks to follow the guidelines, the trail guidelines that we set out, then we have to get them to care.
Yeah.
And in order for them to care, they have to understand the impact. And in order for them to understand the impact, they have to be curious. So I start by piquing their curiosity. Then I could get them to understand the pros and cons and the different impact that we have on nature, positive and negative. And then I could get them to care. And when we care, then we engage more, and then we'll follow the guidelines and understand why they're there. But when it comes to kids and teenagers especially, I've had that question over the years multiple times. And even with just different personality types, what we've done over the years is start to rebrand nature in a way that meets people where they're at. So for teenagers, we're going to highlight towers, we're going to highlight waterfalls, and we're going to give them something that is brag-worthy to their friend or is an epic picture for Instagram.
Right.
So that's what we're going to do. For boardwalks and marshlands, it's been a large focus to rebrand that as an optimal sunrise and sunset location. Again, that makes it more attractive. And they're trails that are usually not, they're not always inundated with all sorts of hikers.
Right.
They're not, some folks might think it's not exciting enough to go to these trails. Well, let's rebrand it as beautiful sunrise and sunsets. I'm trying to think of even like, plogging over the years. Plogging has become trendy in the Ottawa area. Why? Because we talk collectively as like different organizations and influencers and businesses in the area. And we say, hey, this year, let's do 6 different plogging events. We'll introduce the community to it. We'll make contests with it. We're going to make it fun. And again, why is plogging becoming, or one of the positive factors that's making it more popular is that it's brag-worthy. It is brag-worthy to have good values. So you get to take a picture of the trash you cleaned up. You get to show that you're a good human. And that makes it more attractive for people to participate.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about plogging. Some people might not know what that is.
Oh, well, plogging is picking up trash as you're hiking. So yeah. I just love it all around. I forever keep grocery bags or those ad bags in my backpack so that I can pick up trash.
And take it out and bring it out. Yeah. We did that one time. We were, and I'll be travel bragging a little bit, but we were out on an island camping in the middle of the Atlantic off of Belize. Stupid idea when you think about it, but amazing experience. But we were on this little island in the middle of nowhere, and we had been dropped off by a boat. And there was a lot of trash, and we found a garbage bag because I think we had garbage bags with us. And we were about 3-hour boat ride off the coast. And it wasn't like remote, like they do, like it's off the Keys, and they do like kayaking trips across from one, and they key jump. But so we were there, and had been dropped off by a boat, and we picked up all this garbage, and we were bringing it back to shore. And I think the boat driver must have thought we were completely and utterly mad. And it stank. Like we had it in the boat in front of us, and it was just like, oh my God, what are we doing? But we just couldn't leave it there.
No. I don't have the heart to leave, which is why I always have garbage bags. I've picked up like dog waste, human waste products, cigarette butts, and
a lot of plastic. And a lot of plastic.
Yeah, a lot of beer cans. That happens.
So the story I was going to share is, so I live on the south end of Ottawa, so almost near the airport, and so I'm a little far from the Gatineau Hills on the other side of the river. It's not that far; it's 40 minutes away. But there's a spot, and you might have felt it, but as soon as when you're on the highway going up towards the Gatineau Hills, there's a spot as soon as you cross a lot of the city, and as soon as you rise the crest of the hill, and you just kind of go,
yeah.
Do you have that feeling? Like, when does that feeling hit you? You see, it seems like you can relate to that. Like, when do you get that feeling?
As soon as I hit a country road.
Yeah.
As soon as I hit a country road. If it's a gravel road or a dirt road, all the better. But as soon as you get out, even small towns give me that feeling because it's less noise or buzzy than the city, right?
Yeah.
And there's a reason I live out in the country. It's just nice.
So I want to touch base on hopefully two more things, because I think they're important. One of them is you talk about, fundraising for causes that you believe in through this. And so can you tell me a little bit about those causes that you fundraise for and how they came about it and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So the conservation charity that I donate to through Girl Gone Good is Mississippi Madawaska Land Trust. And they have, oh my goodness, I think they're up to 8 or so properties in the area. It's mmlt.ca. And they have 4 or 5 properties open to the public. So it's land trust, so it's private land open to the public. And they have some of the best properties to explore, like critters and wildlife. And they're very rugged properties that I enjoy hiking. And they're wonderful folks. They always have speaker series and different educational seminars. And then the other one is Boots on the Ground. They started out as an Ontario-based charity. They're 24/7 peer-to-peer support for EMS, and they're about to expand to veterans. So I think they're pretty phenomenal in that they're trained peer-to-peer support for our EMS folks.
So I understand, and we have time, but I understand the MMLT. Can you talk a little bit about we're getting a little bit outside of the nature part, but I think it's an important story. Maybe, what is Boots on the Ground, and why your involvement in that?
So I'm also a veteran myself. So I find that mental health is a priority. And I think just as a human in our everyday world, mental health should be our priority, one of our dimensions of well-being. And what I like about Boots on the Ground is that they have psych oversight and that their peer-to-peer support is trained. They're very grounded, they're very professional, and it's 24/7. And I've participated in different like nature therapy outdoors, and I've taken folks out from Soldier On, which is a wonderful organization for veterans that have different challenges, or Outward Bound Canada for veterans. And the most enlightening, beautiful moments I've seen for anyone who is struggling or looking to expand their mental health is when we're connected to each other in those peer-to-peer environments and outdoors. So although Boots on the Ground doesn't have the outdoor element, they do have that peer-to-peer, which I love.
So you touched a little bit about that, that nature and wellness, and how important do you think nature to mental health is? And we are living in a much more urbanized world now, and I think a lot of people are missing out on that. I know for a fact we're missing out on this, but obviously you've embraced it, and I think you probably find solace in nature as well. So how important is nature, do you think, to our mental well-being?
I think we need to go back to the days where we realized how important nature was to our own health. But it's not nature. I think for our own well-being, connection is the key. And that nature is one of those 3 things that we need to connect to. So we need to connect to ourselves and have awareness, and connect to others and have that social connection in safe places, and connect to nature. And that's where the magic lies for me, is in the connection. And nature is one of those 3 things.
And that's awesome. And I think, when we first met and I mentioned Nature for All, I think there was a bit of a connection, and you've more or less embraced the idea. And I think you were already embracing the idea, because Nature for All is a concept. It's not an organization. It really is a concept. And you've put it onto your website, and you've created a specific component of that as well. Talk a little bit about that. Like, what does and what did Nature for All mean for you?
I think Nature for All encompasses everything that I would like to be the heartbeat of Girl Gone Good. Honestly, to have the very inclusive and very accessible resources that bridges the curiosity with the learning. You guys have it all. And I try to promote that and put those pieces into what I have. I believe if we lead our organizations and our businesses with our values, then we're going to get further as a society than if we don't. So I like leading the outdoors and everything with values first. Which
Yeah,
you guys
and it's a good human revolution. That's the one. And I love when things like this happen because they're organic. Because they make sense.
Yeah. It's all, for me, this is the outlet of doing good, and we all need our outlet to give back to society. And this is mine. The community has just been really amazing at embracing it with me.
Sounds good. Well, Vickie, we're slowly running out of time. Time flies. I think, this was a wonderful conversation. I've been, ever since I met you, I've been wanting to have a conversation like this with you to get to, and we live in this more or less in the same city as well. And one of these days, I'm gonna put you on the spot, because one of these days I want you to invite me and to go on a hike with you for a day, or whatever outing you do. And we'll do like a Nature for All hike, and we'll talk about whatever. So keep me in mind. I'm going to go out and buy, the next guide for sure, because I think what you're doing is amazing. And I go back to what I talked about a little bit at the beginning is that local aspect, right? And I think that's key in a lot of things that we want to be doing is that local and the connections that we create.
Yes, exactly.
All right. If you anything else you'd want to add that we didn't touch on, you got a minute or two, and then I'll bring Aleksa. And
I'm excited to listen to Aleksa. I want to listen to everybody. Only to seek out multiple sources. We have a lot of leaders in the outdoor industry in Ottawa and around. We have great people like Ottawa Aventure and Ontario Hiking and Trees for Breathe. We just have the community, and I'm sure whether Ottawa's your place or not, if you just look in your community for who's leading the way, get to know everybody and learn from everybody, connect with everybody. Good. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Thank you so much, Vickie. Appreciate your time. Have a great one. Oh, that was so much fun. And I think we're going to have as much fun with my next guest because the organization that she works with is also pretty amazing and pretty cool. I'm going to bring her on right now and get to it because, and oh, by the way, Aleksa, no pressure, but you are the last speaker of the whole My Nature Love Story event. And I know it's going to be good, so I'm not worried about it at all. But, I just wanted to put a little bit of pressure on you.
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Well, it's lovely to finally meet you, and thank you for having me here. Big shoes to fill.
Oh, you have no idea. We've been on a whirlwind adventure over the last 48 hours, but I have no doubt in my mind that this is going to be as exciting and as fun as every single other conversation we've had. Aleksa, maybe you can start. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what your connection with nature is, and how that became, like, what's your nature love, like, what's that story that connects with you that said, what, nature is it for me.
Oh my goodness. Well, again, hello everyone, my name's Aleksa. I'm a guest on Turtle Island, the lover of nature, a cat mom, and I am the program manager of Natural Curiosity, which is a phenomenal environmental education program that's housed in the Ontario Institute for Studies of Education in Toronto. That's part of the University of Toronto. And I'd say, oh my goodness, it wasn't one moment, but rather many different moments puzzled together that really solidified my love and my realization of my love for nature. That's what I would say to start us off there.
Yeah. So what's your, what are your recollections, of being in nature as a child, and what are some of those feelings that evoked in you when you were doing that?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Just sheer joy and bliss. I'm lucky to live very close to a park where I'm located in Toronto as well. So in my childhood home that was nearby, I would just always be in nature with my family, with my loved ones. And that was something, that connection bit from the last speaker as well, that was really just
beautiful in solidifying this. Even just hearing from some of the spectacular, conservationists and fellow environment lovers throughout the past 2 days that I've been able to tune into. And I know this is the last conversation, but as they say, the end is just a new beginning. And I really think that's something that's beautiful, that's going to amount from this. So
Yeah, for sure. So tell me a little bit about Natural Curiosity. What is it? What do you do? What's the goal?
Yeah, so to ground, I guess, my personal identity in that work at Natural Curiosity, we always like situating ourselves with or alongside the land before we formally introduce ourselves. So I'm actually going to go ahead and share some slides.
Sounds good. So you've got the little present button at the bottom.
I do. Okay. This is my first time using this platform, so bear with me, everybody.
Yeah, that's all good. Should work.
So share screen.
Takes a while sometimes to just share.
Yeah, it's all good. Okay. Can you see my screen, the slides I have? It says acknowledging traditional land. I'm not sure. There we go. Thank you. So, yeah, at Natural Curiosity, we always like to start with situating ourselves with or alongside the land, as I mentioned, before we introduce ourselves. So in doing so today, I actually want to start off by showcasing the importance of making and moving beyond land acknowledgements through this perspective. So if you are unfamiliar with what a land acknowledgement is, a land acknowledgement is essentially a formal statement that recognizes and respects the Indigenous peoples of stewards of the land in which you're on. And as I mentioned, I'm located right now in what is colonially known as Toronto. So as acknowledgements have become more ubiquitous, particularly in educational settings, those of us that are settlers, myself included, really need to put in the work to ensure that acknowledging the land remains an active and disruptive process through this lens. So, as you can see on the slides, there's a quote there, and that's from Dr. Hayden King, who is an Anishinaabe professor at the Toronto Metropolitan University. And Hayden states, "It's one thing to say, hey, we're on the territory of the Mississaugas or Anishinaabe in the Haudenosaunee. It's another thing to say, this is who we're on the territory of, and here's what that compels me to do." So with that in mind, I wanted to actually showcase two different land acknowledgements. One which is a more typical land acknowledgement, if you will, a more typical institutional land acknowledgement, and another one that digs deeper, one that's actually from the school in which I work. So here it is. I just want to take a moment to I'm going to read them both out.
Go ahead.
But just let it sit with you. Thank you. So Toronto has been the site of human activity for 15,000 years. The land is the territory of the Wendat and Petun First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was subject to the territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and Confederacy of the Anishinaabe and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. So as I mentioned, this is a typical one that you may see. Many schools across Canada and educational institutions more broadly, as well as non-educational institutions, use one similar to this, though this one does recognize more than some do. But it doesn't really showcase what it compels you to do, or what it compels me to do.
Right.
And many Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island, they've been saying that these things are quite performative, right? If we just check them off a list and move along business as usual. So in recognizing that, I want to share another one. So this one, as you can tell from the onset, it's a bit longer. And it was actually written by students at the Dr. Eric Jackman Institute of Child Study, which is the school in which Natural Curiosity, the program, is housed. after a year-long inquiry into Indigenous education in the library under the leadership of Krista Spence, who's a really awesome teacher librarian at the school. And the idea was to create this living document that would grow and change with the school. And the idea of it came from the students. So as I read this one, it's really cool. I just want you all to think about your relationship with the land beneath your feet right now, as well as your respective treaty partners wherever you may be. So this presentation begins with the land acknowledgement, because we will be using the land and need to respect this place where Indigenous people have lived and continue to live. We wrote this to share some of our learning and to teach others. We thought about who would be hearing it, and we didn't want to make it too complicated or too simple. We'd like to thank the first peoples of this land and all of creation, including the animals, plants, land, water, air, rocks, trees, and all that exists on this beautiful earth. We honor the Indigenous people whose traditional territories include the land on which we gather today: the Petun, the Wendat, Mississaugas, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and other nations whose names we no longer remember because of the impact of colonialism. We want to honor the treaties that were made with the land and between First Nations and the Crown. Treaties should be honored no matter what political party is in power. The story of Canada that most of us know is not the whole story. We've been learning from Indigenous sources about losing language and culture through residential schools, and also about ceremony, celebration, and strength of community. When we are thinking of doing something to the land, like dams or pipelines, we should ask Indigenous peoples first, because they lived in balance with nature for thousands of years. We have lost our relationship to the earth by doing things like polluting and taking too much. We need to ask ourselves, what is more important, what I get out of this, or what happens to the land? We need to think 7 generations ahead. What we do today, how will that affect tomorrow? We invite you to do the same.
That's pretty powerful, isn't it?
It is.
When we talk about, nature and education, and if we frame it in this context, it changes a little bit about how we start thinking about our relationship with nature and our relationship with others, I think. Like, when you see this, what does that mean for you, and how do you incorporate that into your work going forward?
Oh, totally. So many amazing questions and so many different pieces to break apart, but they're all really whole. I think for me, what was really unique, since I was not with Natural Curiosity at the time that this particular land acknowledgement was created, but just to hear that this was made collaboratively by grade 6 students. So when you're in grade 6 in Canada, you're typically around the age of 11 years old. And to take that initiative and recognize that the school wasn't necessarily doing enough. It was the students who really wanted to move beyond this static land acknowledgement. One that was similar to the one that I first showed you. And it's just an incredibly beautiful process of continuing to learn and unlearning and rebuilding upon all that that is so special.
Yeah. Do you want to now take us into a little bit more about what Natural Curiosity does then? Like, you take this information, you take the context of where we are, and maybe you could, as you explain a little bit about what you do, maybe, explain a little bit about that context of Indigenous relations here in Canada, and then incorporating that, because you do a lot of education, that's your focus. And so maybe walk us through a little bit about that work.
Oh my goodness, definitely. So what I'm going to do, keeping in mind the time as well,
Yeah,
I am going
we got time.
I will skip along 2 slides. So just ignore my skipping of things. We will get back to it. Okay, So, what is natural curiosity? Essentially, we are, as I mentioned, an environmental education program that's housed in Boise at the University of Toronto. And we provide professional learning opportunities for educators across Turtle Island, or what you may know as North America. We offer webinars, workshops, walking tours, and so many other opportunities just to really support educators on their journey of embedding Indigenous perspectives into children's environmental inquiry. So we predominantly work with kindergarten to grade 6 educators. However, we also do work with educators up to grade 12 and even folks who are in university and undergraduate degrees and graduate degrees. So Natural Curiosity as a whole was actually launched in 2011. That was the year we published the first addition to our educator resource, which aimed to help educators disseminate and develop environmental education best practices through our 4-branch pedagogical framework. Just to go to the next slide. Pardon me. Since then, we published a second edition to the resource in 2018. And this book, Natural Curiosity, second edition, The Importance of Children's Perspectives in Environmental Inquiry, is shown on the slides there. So it may or may not look familiar to you if you're an educator, but the really unique thing about it is that we expanded on our learning from the previous edition because we realized the importance of Indigenous perspectives was being articulated, through an Indigenous voice. That was so great that we actually hired on an Indigenous voice to articulate that. Doug Anderson, who's Métis, and he's consulted at community and government levels for years. And he's also a huge collaborator at the lab school in which we work. He added an Indigenous lens to each of the 4 branches, which I will show you. But definitely, what's really significant about this collaboration with him and many other voices was the revisiting and reevaluating of our own work, which, as we could tell as well, the students were engaging in that reevaluating the idea that all ideas are improvable, which is really grounded in and reflected by changing times and in communities.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so you talk about, so you're really focused on educating teachers and sharing that information so that they can then pass it on to youth. How, in the context of Canada, I guess, is, how important is it from what we're doing now, that connection with nature and making sure we incorporate that Indigenous aspect? And I think that can probably relate to a lot of places around the world where there are Indigenous, populations that are striving to get their voices heard as well.
Oh, definitely. It's so incredibly important. It always has been, but now more than ever, I'd say. It's really interesting because within the context of Ontario, at least, so there's a new course that was introduced in the Toronto District School Board, which is our grade 11 English course. So English is mandatory throughout all years of public school education. But for this grade 11 course, they decided to make it just incredibly focused on Indigenous voices and people's stories. And what I learned recently, and at first thinking, wow, look at this. We've come so far. Well, Manitoba, another province in Canada, has actually been doing that 20 years ago. They've actually implemented courses, right? So
Right.
to think of all of these differences, again, in recognizing the gruesome and horrible legacy of residential schools in Canada, that's the first step. But again, also just showcasing voices, especially for students, Indigenous voices, and offering those opportunities for them to engage in land-based learning, something Natural Curiosity advocates for and is just holistically embedded in, is crucial.
Yeah. You talk about land-based learning as opposed to just, book learning. Like, how important is that in a school setting? And and I know I guess you promoted it a lot, but there are some barriers, I think, just even from an understanding perspective, right? How do you approach that from your situation at Natural Curiosity?
Totally. So it's quite interesting actually, because my background in my studies, I recently completed my Master of Teaching. So I am an Ontario certified high school, or technically grade 7 to 12, geography and history educator. And I found in my experience that it's challenging to do that within institutional confines with the older grades. But for younger grades, regardless of if you are located in a rural area or in a city, though it may be easier in some than others. Of course, there are many limitations there, but it's as simple as just getting outside. I feel as if many educators said that's the hardest step and barrier to get over. You just have to get outside, and it's the learning journey with you and your students, right? As an educator, you're not the sole expert of this knowledge, right? You're learning alongside with them. And I think that pedagogy and change in philosophy of your teaching, or the way that you understand learning, will actually show students that learning is a lifelong process, and getting outside is just the first step into recognizing that.
It's a little bit of letting go of control, isn't it?
Almost definitely. You have to let go of so much control. We're so used to routines, right? We get to school, we listen to the announcements. Everything is just structured in a way that goes along with the routine because it's what we're comfortable with.
Yeah.
But when you start to do things that are uncomfortable, especially outdoors, that's when lots of awesome learning happens.
Yeah, from and this is, you're focused on education, obviously. Like, what's the importance of that outdoor connection from an education perspective? I'm just curious, right? Like, we, growing up, we were in our desks, but I think we're learning a lot more. There's projects about greening school grounds, and I think we're learning a little bit more. But how important is it to get children outside and connecting with nature?
It is so incredibly important, to say the least. To start, just for students, for their mental health, it does wonders getting outside. For their socio-emotional health, for their relationship building, having these opportunities to engage with the land and learn from the land and alongside the land with their classmates and just teachers as well, but the community, that does wonders for them, which I think is especially needed now as we're still recovering from the pandemic. COVID is still here, right? Of course, schools have transitioned to be in person, but we are still feeling the repercussions of what has happened. And in addition to that, it also equips students, youth, children with the knowledge that they need to be successful in the world and better understand what's going on. We're living through a climate crisis, racial injustice, massive inequities between the global north and global south. Equipping them with this knowledge through growing outside and developing that connection to the land through sending out their roots and just lighting their fire, which is those are two Indigenous lenses on our pedagogy. It just, again, it does wonders for them.
Tell me a little bit about that pedagogy. Like, what is it that you're focused on through Natural Curiosity that doesn't exist in the existing curriculum? Like, what's that need, and how do you address it, and how do you then present it to teachers so that they can actually incorporate it into their work? And I'm thinking you might get me into a presentation mode here.
I do have just one more slide to show you if I can.
That's fine.
There's a video. I'm taking that away. Oops. Here we go. Beautiful. So this is our interconnected pedagogical framework. So going over this briefly, I think will really give you a sense that all of our learning is grounded in not only land-based learning, but it's just a really holistic framework. So we start in the east, and over there, the purple sign, we have inquiry and engagement, and that one really connects to developing a strong sense of spirituality through wonder and embracing the spirit of learning. And then if you move south to the green, our next branch is experiential learning. So that's all about providing a deeply rooted sense of place. If we head west, the third branch on integrated learning, it instills a recognition that everything is related, as we have over there. And then finally, up north, yellow, leading north, our final branch is moving towards sustainability. So emphasizing the importance of reciprocity in how we live and act in the world. I think I mentioned this point earlier, and though this pedagogy, as many things in life, we tend to tear them apart to better understand them, but it's a really holistic and multifaceted framework that reminds us, I think, to just center our own perspectives
Right.
within how we teach and learn.
Interesting. And I'm assuming these are all interconnected. Like, it's not necessarily one happening after the other. They're kind of, you can reach them fairly quickly, or and not even necessarily in the same order, I would assume, right?
Exactly. And that's, I think, the beauty with interconnected pedagogies and interdisciplinary work. You're learning all these things, and again, though you might tear them apart or organize them in certain ways to better understand them, the interconnections are crucial because we live in a completely interconnected world. So the sooner we understand that, the better we're able to learn and
Definitely.
showcase what we've learned.
And it's funny because when I see this, I've seen it, like, you're deconstructing how to help teachers get their students to fall in love with nature, in a sense, right? Because
it's true.
Because that's, at the end of the day, that's what we need is people to fall in love with nature, so that they can do to work to conserve it and to enjoy it as well.
Oh yeah, and I think it's quite common within education. If students don't develop that love of nature, I'd say students really, how can I articulate this? An educator we work with, an Indigenous educator, Natasha Bascovan, who's one of our coaches, whenever she talks about this framework, especially within the first branch, inquiry and engagement and lighting the fire, which is all about, again, a strong sense of spirituality. She states that students' fire, it doesn't need to be lit. It's already there.
Right.
And over time in education, the fire just tends to be blown out. But if we find a way to nurture that fire and their interests in different things, children are naturally curious about nature and about the world. And we need to move forward with that. We shouldn't shut it down. We need to let them explore their interests and curiosities. And through that perspective, amazing things can amount from it. So,
well, we had earlier today, we had two 15-year-olds, I believe, maybe 16, and they started their own drone. Like, they basically take drones to find pollution and garbage, and it's like, these are kids. Like, it's unbelievable. But
oh my goodness.
Yeah, but one of the things they said, like, but I think it's challenging too, because you need to inspire that optimism and that love first, and not the fear that, that, oh, polar bears are dying and the world is climate change, and how do you manage that, like, from the fear-based climate change or fear-based information versus the optimism? Both have a space, I think, but from a child perspective and an education perspective, I think that's a very important component to it, isn't it?
Oh, it is. It really is. Climate anxiety is widespread, and rightfully so, but also showcasing amazing stories from educators and people like today, really, that they're awesome folks who are conducting this amazing work to make the world a better place, and that we have really great opportunities to leverage them, to leverage that knowledge and their experiences. With children, of course, there's certain things that you can comprehend, right, as you're learning, as you're growing up and gaining a better understanding of the world, but just in little bite-sized pieces, the quote-unquote negative stuff, which is there, you introduce them to, and then over time, they're able to take on more with that piece. But again, if your understanding of the world is grounded in curiosity, then the rest will be so much easier.
Definitely. We're running out of time already. This has been an interesting conversation. My question that, and we've been asking this question pretty much to every single person who we've interviewed. And as you know, like Nature for All isn't an organization. It really is a concept. That's why there's a hashtag in front of it. And I'd like to know, when you think of Nature for All in that sense, or as words, what comes to mind for you? And yeah.
Oh, awesome question. Oh my goodness, there's so many words going through my mind right now. Nature is really something that envelops me with just comfort, joy, and I hate to say it again. Actually, I don't hate to say it again, so I will. Curiosity. I think that curiosity is the root to our understanding of the world, as I mentioned, and I'm so thankful that I've had the opportunity to remain curious of the world and nature growing up and into my professional career. And I hope that those around the world, regardless of your age, continue to remain curious and really lean into what you're interested in, your strengths, your passions, and let that take you wherever it may be, especially within nature. Because that's why we're here today, right?
It is. I think those are great words to kind of finish off, unless you've got something else, that you wanted to share about natural curiosity. But I think this has been, for me anyways, like it's been a really interesting conversation. I think an important one to have. And being in Canada as well, I think the work that you're doing in that perspective is pretty amazing. And we've had some amazing speakers throughout. So if you want a last word, by all means, jump right in.
You got it. I really appreciate this opportunity, and I'll let you close the show up.
Perfect. Well, thanks you, Aleksa. Appreciate it. I'm gonna put you in the background while I close up the event, and really appreciate you taking the time. It's now supper time. Well, this wraps up the Nature for All Love Fest. We've had an amazing 2 days of amazing nature love stories from around the world. I'm pretty sure we've gone around the world a couple of times already. I feel like I've done that. We have a lot of the stories already on the website. I encourage you to go visit it. There's some amazing stories that were submitted that we weren't able to get on during this event. These are recorded. They'll be available on the Nature for All website, YouTube page. I encourage you to go out and explore them, share them. We've had amazing inspirational stories, and I hope that we can continue doing this. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night, and keep connecting with nature, keep learning about nature, and because we want to conserve it.